Hey guys, tonight we're heading way, way back, before Google, before swords, before even baked bread was a daily thing, for the full ride through the ancient Egyptian empire. And full disclosure, you probably won't survive this. Seriously, the Nile floods will drown you, the pharaohs will conscript you, the sun will roast you alive, and if none of that gets you, some baboon-headed god will probably judge your soul with a feather. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and what time it is down in the comments. I love seeing where in the world we're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing barefoot at the muddy edge of the Nile. The sun is molten orange, and it bleeds across the rippling surface of the river. Your toes sink into wet, cool silt. Somewhere behind you, reeds rustle in the breeze, and the wind smells like fish, sweat, and dust. You hear a rhythmic splash. Someone's throwing a hand-woven net into the water nearby. A few ibis birds strut along the shore like tiny judgmental priests. This is your world. The Nile isn't just a river, it's the jugular vein of your entire civilization. Everything here, life, food, politics, even the gods, rises and falls with the river. When it floods right, your granaries bulge. When it doesn't, you starve, riot, and eventually sacrifice goats to something with a jackal's head. You don't need clocks or calendars. You've got 3 seasons: Akhet, flood; Pere, planting; and Shemu, harvest. The Nile tells you when to start and when to hide. Behind you, further from the riverbank, is raw, infinite desert. It's like a wall made of heat and silence. Nobody messes with the desert unless they're trying to disappear or die. But this contrast between life-giving river and deadly sands, that's the key to Egypt's origin story. It shaped the way people here think. The world is ordered, structured, divine chaos. That's for barbarians out there in the sandstorm zones. So you're a river person, and you're not alone. Dozens, maybe hundreds of little villages line the Nile like beads on a cord. These are the nomes, Egypt's first tiny states. Each one has its own local chieftain, a crop surplus if it's lucky, and maybe a weird sacred animal it treats better than its own children. There's one village where they mummify fish. Another worships a falcon that allegedly killed a demon once. Yeah, it's getting weird already. Most of these villages are friendly-ish, until water gets scarce or some ox dies mysteriously. Then it's spears and shouting and torches, and some guy named Hotep declares himself king of 5 mud huts and a goat. Still, the villagers slowly learn to trade. You walk north along the Nile, well actually you float if you're smart since the river flows north, and you find copper, honey, obsidian from the Red Sea, and intoxicating blue stones from as far away as Afghanistan. That's right, even before the pyramids, Egyptians had a thing for turquoise and eyeliner. Meanwhile, in the south, what we now call Upper Egypt, because the Nile flows upside down from your average map's perspective, a few big bosses start building up. These guys don't just have storage pits and fancy feathers, they've got real muscle, proto-armies, tattooed enforcers, and war canoes with crocodile-shaped prows. And then, someone paints a scorpion on a ceremonial mace head. Yes, really. He's known today as the Scorpion King. No, not the Dwayne Johnson one, though if you squint hard enough maybe. This early ruler is part fact, part myth, but he's real enough to have had his name carved into artifacts dating back to around 3200 BCE. You get the sense he wasn't exactly a cuddler. His job? Probably to intimidate the ever-living daylight out of neighbouring tribes, stockpile enough food to survive droughts, and look really dramatic in war paint. We don't know his real name, just that scorpion glyph and a symbol for king. But it's the start of something big, power concentrating along the river. What's wild is that most of what we know about these early kings comes from tombs, not their palaces, not their battlefields, just their graves. That's the first of many hints that in Egypt, death isn't the end. It's sort of the main event. Everything you do in life is a warm-up for how you'll be treated in the afterlife. Get it wrong, you'll have your heart weighed against a feather and fed to a crocodile-lion-hippo hybrid named Amit. Fun. You pass one of these tombs, a rectangular mud brick structure they call a mastaba. Inside it's loaded with jars of beer, bread loaves, jewellery, and even little carved models of servants. If you're rich enough in life, you don't have to lift a finger in death. That's the dream. Somewhere down the Nile, a few bold souls start experimenting with something new: writing. It's early, clunky stuff, just pictographs carved onto ivory tags, used mostly to track taxes, grain stores, or tribute. You wouldn't write a poem with it, but you could definitely keep someone honest with a stylus and some ink. And this is where things start to coalesce. Culture, language, burial rituals, trade. Egypt isn't just a bunch of mud hut fishing towns anymore. It's a mood, a vibe. And like any vibe that refuses to be ignored, it's attracting powerful people. You lie back under the reeds, eyes half closed. Crickets buzz, and the Nile murmurs as it flows past. Overhead, the stars begin to pierce the velvet sky. The same ones your people will soon map into myths and calendars. Orion becomes Osiris. Sirius becomes the goddess Sopdet. The heavens aren't just twinkling lights, they're schedules, prophecies, and divine clues. As the last birds settle into their nests, you realise you're living through the dawn of the empire. You're a nobody, sure, a farmer maybe, or a potter or a fisherman with 2 crooked teeth and a missing sandal, but around you something vast and lasting is taking shape. And this time, the gods aren't just in the sky, they're beginning to wear crowns. The sun rises thick and red over the Nile, and today something's different. You feel it in the earth. There's movement, tension. Whispers pass from one village to the next. Chiefs are sharpening blades. Messengers are ferrying baskets of fish and linen with strange new symbols burned into the lids. The rumours are all pointing to one man, Narmer. You don't know much about him yet. No one does. But everyone's heard the name, and you get the sense that he's not interested in playing nice with the other local rulers. He's not here to make friends. Narmer, it turns out, is in the empire-building business. You've seen his symbol, a catfish and a chisel combined into a single royal glyph. It's weird and a little unsettling, like a logo for some god-level blacksmith, and what he's about to do will echo through history like the clang of bronze on bone. You find yourself at the edge of a dusty plain, the air buzzing with heat and tension. Across the field, warriors from Upper Egypt march behind tall standards, painted with animal emblems and divine symbols. Their kilts are tight, their chests bare, and their eyes serious. You're just a bystander, safely out of spear-throwing range, but you can't look away. What's about to happen is less a battle and more a statement. Lower Egypt, those lush, delta-fed lands to the north, has been its own thing for centuries. Richer soil, more tangled rivers, and looser politics. But to Narmer, all this division, it's untidy. The Nile should flow through one kingdom, one crown, one pharaoh. You hear the first clash of copper weapons, the thud of sandals on trampled reeds, and the roar of men who believe their gods are watching. It's not long before the banners of Lower Egypt start to fall. When the dust settles, the survivors are herded into rows, their arms bound behind them with reeds. Narmer walks through the line like he's inspecting vegetables. And then he does something no one's dared before. He claims both lands. You hear the announcement at a village gathering days later, delivered by a tall official with a shaved head and more eyeliner than you thought possible for a dude. Narmer is now king of Upper and Lower Egypt. The 2 lands are united. It's official. The age of petty warlords is over. Narmer celebrates the moment with the most extra thing you've ever seen, a ceremonial palette. Not for painting, no, for propaganda. Carved in slate, it shows him wearing both crowns, the tall white hedget of Upper Egypt and the swirling red deshret of Lower Egypt. On one side, he's shown smiting an enemy while holding his hair like a trophy handle. On the other, a pair of mythological beasts, serpopards with long intertwining necks, symbolise unity. Even his art is flexing. You probably wouldn't call this subtle, but that's the point. Egypt has stepped into the spotlight of history, and it is not blinking. But unification doesn't mean peace. Narmer's job is just beginning. He has to weld this Frankenstein kingdom together with more than spears and scary makeup. So, he sets up a capital smack between the 2 regions, Memphis. It's not flashy, but it's smart. Strategically located, easy to defend, and close to both ends of the Nile. You travel there once, and it smells like boat tar, fresh-cut papyrus, and ambition. At this early stage, government is a weird mix of tribal loyalty and divine cosplay. Narmer doesn't just rule because he won a fight. He rules because he's the living Horus. That's right. He's not just a king, he's a god. Or at least a guy who cosplays as one until it sticks. Horus, the falcon-headed sky god, is now his celestial sponsor, and the symbolism's everywhere. On temple walls, in prayers, even on his headdress. That divine backing gives his rule a kind of moral inevitability. Disobey Narmer, and you're not just annoying a king, you're offending the heavens, which, as marketing strategies go, is kind of genius. Still, not everyone's sold. Some gnome lords bristle under this new order. There are whispers, grumblings, attempted rebellions quickly crushed under heel. You help repair a granary after one such skirmish. Charred timbers, shattered pots, a half-buried amulet in the dirt that you keep for luck. But you also start to see the benefits. With unity comes infrastructure. Roads, trade routes, irrigation canals. Things no single village could afford alone. Grain moves more efficiently. Obsidian from the Red Sea shows up in marketplaces. Even the scribes are happy busy standardizing early hieroglyphs, so no one has to guess what a donkey means anymore. Your cousin trains as a priest scribe in a local temple, learning to mix ink from soot and gum, and how to draw an owl so it doesn't look like a confused chicken. This is the slow march toward bureaucracy, and yes, it's just as tedious as it sounds. But it works. Egypt is becoming a machine, and not a bad one either. The temples play a role in this new unity too. They're not just spiritual centres, they're economic hubs, power banks, and data vaults. You walk past one and see baskets of barley being weighed and recorded, statues being polished with sacred oils, and holy cows being tended like VIPs. At night, under a sky so clear it hurts, you lie on your roof and stare at the stars. Somewhere out there, Narmer's legacy is being carved into the universe. You hear your grandfather muttering stories of how the gods created Egypt by spilling order onto chaos, and how Pharaoh is the thin red line between both. You believe it, a little. But also, you've seen what happens to people who stand in that line too long. They burn. Now here's the thing scholars are still chewing over. Was Narmer the same person as Menes, the legendary first pharaoh? Some say yes. They're two names for the same unifier. Others insist Menes came later, or that Narmer merely started the job that someone else finished. The truth? Lost in time, buried in tombs still waiting to be cracked open. But Narmer's palette is real, and so is his legacy. As you drift off, listening to the river slap against the rocks and the distant hoot of a desert owl, you realise something big is happening. You're living in the birth of the first real nation-state. No kings of tiny villages, no loose alliances, just one river, one throne, and one man crazy enough to think he could tame both. So, let's say you've survived the unification, your village wasn't torched, and your cousin's still scribbling bird shapes onto bits of bark congrats. You now live in history's first centralised state, and Narmer, that catfish chisel guy. He's either recently died or gone full god mode off screen. Either way, the pharaohs are here to stay, and they're not just kings. They're cosmic glue. You wake up one morning to find your village buzzing. A messenger from Memphis arrives in a sleek boat with carved falcon heads and gold inlays. He's wearing linen so white it could blind you, and he smells like imported frankincense. He unrolls a scroll, speaks a few dramatic lines about divine balance and royal authority, and announces there will be a new construction, something never before attempted. A monument not just for the living, but for the gods, and also for the dead, especially the dead. You groan. Because when someone in Egypt says monument, what they really mean is you're about to move a lot of very heavy rocks. The king in charge now is Djoser, and if you thought Narmer was dramatic with his ceremonial palettes, Djoser's about to level up. You've heard rumours about his advisor, a man named Imhotep. Yes, that Imhotep, the one later mistaken for a god of medicine and centuries after that a horror movie villain. But here now, he's just a brilliant polymath in sandals with a serious thing for geometry. Imhotep has a vision, not just another mastaba. No more squat rectangles squatting in the dirt like stubborn tombstones. No, he wants to build up way up. He's sketched plans for something called a step pyramid, a structure layered like a staircase to the stars. It sounds ridiculous. Also, completely on brand for a society obsessed with height, gods, and impressing the neighbours. You're drafted, naturally. You spend your days hauling limestone from the quarries, your hands blistered, your back wrecked. The supervisors shout a lot. Someone tries to motivate you by saying your work will be remembered for thousands of years. You're mostly motivated by water breaks and the promise of beer at the end of the day. But slowly, stone by stone, the thing rises. The step pyramid at Saqqara is weird at first. 6 stacked platforms rising over 200 feet, each layer slightly smaller than the one below. It looks like a wedding cake designed by someone with control issues, but you can't deny it. It's jaw-dropping. For the first time, the landscape doesn't just roll flat along the Nile now it reaches. You learn later that the pyramid isn't just a tomb, it's a cosmic elevator. It represents the pharaoh's journey from earth to heaven, from king to star, from man to God. The underground chambers beneath it are even more elaborate. Twisting tunnels, fake doors to confuse grave robbers, and walls inlaid with blue tiles that shimmer like the night sky. You get a chance to peek inside once, sneaking in with a group delivering offerings. The air is cool and still, and the carvings make your skin prickle. You feel like you're standing inside a body, like the pyramid is the pharaoh and the tomb is eternal heart. Around the pyramid, a complex rises, temples, courtyards, ceremonial halls. Priests bustle about, burning incense and whispering chants to invisible gods. You start to notice a pattern. Everything here is about order, not just in death, but in life. The rituals, the architecture, even the way fields are measured. Straight lines, divine proportions, cosmic math. Imhotep, it turns out, was also an early scientist. He wrote treatises on medicine, listed out symptoms and treatments, and supposedly performed surgeries with obsidian blades. You find this both impressive and terrifying. One guy is designing pyramids and fixing teeth. The multitasking is borderline rude, and while you're hauling stones and dodging temple goats, a big idea starts to form in the culture around you. Egypt isn't just a kingdom anymore, it's a machine built on eternal concepts. Ma'at, the divine order. Ma'at isn't just a goddess with a feather on her head. She's a philosophy, a law, a cosmic spreadsheet. She's why the Nile floods on time, why the stars follow their paths, and why you don't steal your neighbour's cow even if he definitely deserves it. The pharaoh doesn't rule by might alone. He rules by maintaining Ma'at. If he fails, if drought hits, or plague spreads, or the army loses, it's not just bad luck. It means the king has failed to keep the universe from unravelling. No pressure. As Djoser grows old, priests begin prepping for his transition from man to divine ancestor. You see more processions, more animal sacrifices, more suspiciously expensive statues arriving from faraway workshops. Death here isn't an end, it's a promotion. But scholars today still argue, was Djoser's pyramid truly the first of its kind, or were there older, lost experiments in stacked tombs that crumbled before making the highlight reel? Some say other step structures predated his reign but weren't as sophisticated. Others believe Imhotep's design was genuinely groundbreaking, Egypt's moon landing minus the moon and the landing. Whatever the case, this project sets off a frenzy. Pharaohs that follow will all try to one-up Djoser. Bigger pyramids, smoother sides, flashier tombs. You get the sense that eternal life is basically a giant flex contest. And in the middle of all this, you're just trying not to get crushed under a sled full of granite. One day, as the sun melts the horizon and the workers collapse in rows of sweat-streaked exhaustion, you lean against a stone and look up. The step pyramid looms above you, silent and patient. It feels impossible, holy even. You wonder if Djoser will really live forever in there, if maybe the pharaohs have found a cheat code for death. And somewhere inside the cool tunnels of that pyramid, sealed away in gold and silence, Djoser waits. He's not just a man anymore, he's Egypt. You've barely finished nursing your back from the last pyramid project when the rumours start again. Word travels up the Nile like a fast boat in flood season. There's a new king, and he's ambitious. His name is Snefru. You hear it whispered by merchants, sung by children skipping along dusty roads, and eventually declared by a red-faced scribe holding a scroll in a panic attack. Snefru isn't just any pharaoh. He's what historians will later call a pyramid maniac. Think Djoser, but with more style, more limestone, and apparently zero chill. You get summoned again. This time, not to Saqqara, but further south, Dasha. You pack your things with a heavy sigh and kiss your goat goodbye, already feeling the phantom weight of limestone bricks in your spine. Snefru's plan? Not 1 pyramid, 2, maybe even 3, depending on how the first few go. You don't know whether to be impressed or terrified. Honestly, it's both. You arrive at the first site, now called the Maiden Pyramid. From afar, it's stunning. Tall, sleek, with perfectly sharp lines. Up close, it's less great. Cracks are forming, and the outer casing is beginning to collapse like a sandcastle left out in the rain. It's supposed to be a smooth-sided pyramid, a grand evolution from Djoser's step design. But something's wrong with the math, or the angle, or the foundation. Whatever it is, the Maiden Pyramid earns a new nickname. The Collapsed Pyramid. Yeah, not great branding. You don't have long to dwell. Snefru's already moved on. He wants another one, and this time, it has to be perfect. So, he picks a new spot in Djoser and starts building again. You're assigned to the site and join thousands of workers, masons and architects. The heat is brutal, the tools primitive, but the scale of the project is undeniably exciting. The pyramid begins to rise and you feel a strange pride every time a block locks into place. But halfway up, problems. The angle, initially steep, is proving unstable. There's whispering among the engineers, panic behind the priestly facades. They can't just tear it down and start over, so they do what most people do when a project goes sideways. They improvise. The angle is suddenly reduced, making the top half noticeably flatter. The result? A pyramid with a sort of hunched profile. The locals start calling it the Bent Pyramid, and honestly, it's adorable. A giant stone triangle that looks like it tried to stand up too fast and pulled something. But don't laugh too hard. Despite the odd shape, the Bent Pyramid is a structural marvel. It's the first to feature internal chambers that aren't entirely underground. You sneak a peek during a water run and catch a glimpse of sloping corridors and corbelled ceilings high enough to echo your gasp. The scent of fresh-cut limestone, mixed with incense from an on-site offering, hangs heavy in the air. And Snefru, he's not done. Just a short walk away, he commissions another pyramid, this one with all the lessons learned, the Red Pyramid. Now this one? It's the real deal. The Red Pyramid rises smoothly, steadily, and without drama. Its sides slope at a more stable angle, 43 degrees, and its pinkish-red limestone gives it a warm sunset glow. By the time it's finished, it's the tallest man-made structure on Earth. You stand at its base one evening, your fingers trailing along the cool stone, and realise Egypt's finally nailed it. This is the blueprint for greatness, the design that future kings will imitate and escalate. But here's where things get spicy for the archaeologists. Did Snefru really intend to build 3 pyramids? Was the Bent Pyramid always supposed to look like that? Or were these just wild experiments from a king with too much power and not enough structural engineers? Debate rages to this day. Some think Maiden was a test gone wrong. Others claim it was always a symbolic tomb. The truth is buried, literally. What isn't in question is Snefru's legacy. He's the father of pyramid perfection, the OG of smooth-sided style, and perhaps more importantly, he's the father of Khufu, the man who's going to take this stone-stacking business and run with it. But we're not there yet. As you work the Red Pyramid site, you start noticing other changes in Egypt. Trade increases. Ships with cedar wood from Lebanon, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and ebony from Nubia arrive at the docks. The economy booms, temples get bigger, bureaucrats multiply like scarab beetles. You can barely spit without hitting someone in a leopard skin sash holding a scroll. And the priesthood, they're loving this golden age. They claim Snefru's pyramids aren't just tombs, they're conduits between earth and the divine. Each stone, each alignment, is part of a sacred geometry. The Red Pyramid, in particular, is designed to align with cardinal points and the stars of Orion's belt. You're not sure how they figured that out with no telescopes. But hey, never underestimate the power of stargazing and caffeine. There's even a fringe theory floating around your work camp that the pyramids channel energy, that they were designed to resonate with cosmic vibrations and maybe even generate power. You laugh, but then again, this is a civilization that builds cities out of sand and talks to crocodile gods. Who's to say what's too weird? And yet, despite all the awe and reverence, you know the truth on the ground. These projects are brutal. The work breaks bodies. Accidents happen. Tombs get robbed before the king's even cold. You see a friend fall from a ramp and vanish beneath a sled of stone. His name is recorded in a ledger. A priest mumbles a few words and the crew moves on. Still you build. Because something in you believes it matters. That this king and this kingdom are chasing something bigger than life, something eternal, and if it takes a few thousand backs, broken and buried in the dust, to build a stairway to the gods, so be it. You look up one last time at the Red Pyramid. The sun dips behind it, casting a perfect triangle of shadow across the plain. You think, this is what forever looks like. And Snefru? He's already planning his afterlife. By now, your muscles twitch in your sleep, haunted by phantom stone blocks. You've earned your stripes and a limp or two as a pyramid veteran. You can sling a chisel like it's a paintbrush and read a slope angle just by squinting. You think you've seen it all. Then you hear the name, Khufu, the son of Snefru, the heir to the red and the bent and the collapsed. A man who looks at his father's red pyramid, the largest structure in the world, and says, "Cute. Now watch this." So yeah, buckle up. Khufu isn't like Snefru. The workers say Snefru was generous, smiled sometimes, even handed out dates and wine when a project hit a milestone. Khufu, on the other hand, he's cold stone wrapped in linen, distant, untouchable. Whispers follow him, that he's tight with the gods, that he's building something so massive it'll shame every king before him. You're summoned north again to the Giza Plateau, an expanse of flat rock just west of the Nile, not far from modern-day Cairo. Back then, it's just sand, cliffs, and the distant glow of Memphis on the horizon. When you arrive, there's nothing here but engineers in panicked debate and surveyors arguing over grid lines with copper tools and string. Khufu's goal, a pyramid bigger, smoother, and more eternal than any structure ever built. He wants it to reach over 480 feet into the sky, a monument to himself so large it can be seen from the moon. That part's probably made up, but it feels true. Construction begins with surgical precision. Khufu's team doesn't guess. They measure. They cut massive limestone blocks with copper saws and dolerite pounders. You're assigned to one of the sled crews, dragging blocks across the desert on woodrunners lubricated with water. Every day the same. Drag, sweat, lift, eat, collapse. Wake up and do it again. The pyramid's foundation is leveled to within inches across a massive area. No small feat when your tools include sand, rope, and whatever the ancient Egyptian version of eyeballing it was. You hear they might have used water to test level ground. Smart, elegant, also muddy. Over 2 million blocks go into the Great Pyramid. Each one weighs between 2 and 15 tons. You lose count after your first 100. The inner core is a rough limestone, but the outer casing? Smooth, brilliant white Tura limestone, so bright it reflects the sun like a beacon. People call it Akhet Khufu, Khufu's horizon. You stand at the base one morning, squinting up. The thing rises above you like a mountain with sharp edges. From certain angles it seems impossible. Then you remember, you built this, with your hands, with your sweat, and with your neighbours who may or may not have stolen your sandals. Inside the pyramid things get even weirder. You hear the priests arguing over what goes where. There's the descending passage leading underground, a mysterious queen's chamber halfway up, and a steep passage to the king's chamber, where Khufu's empty sarcophagus will eventually sit above that. A series of strange relieving chambers with rough marks on the walls. Quarry graffiti from your fellow workers. You laugh when you see one. It says something like, the gang of Khufu's drunk friends. Even in a holy tomb there's always one guy tagging the wall, and above that, a mystery. A gabled roof of massive granite beams carefully stacked to distribute weight. This is what modern scholars drool over. The precision engineering, the unanswered questions: did they build internal ramps? External spirals? Did aliens show up with laser levels? The debate rages. Some think internal ramps spiraled within the structure, hidden beneath the outer casing. Others point to simple brute force. Thousands of workers, ropes, levers, and genius logistics no one really knows. Even today, no one can perfectly explain how the Great Pyramid was built with such alignment. True north within a tiny fraction of a degree. It's aligned more accurately than the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, and you were just out here trying not to get sunstroke. Contrary to popular myth, you're not a slave. You're a state labourer. A conscript, maybe, but you get fed, housed, even given beer rations. You live in a nearby workers' village, stone homes with drainage, bread ovens and loud neighbours. There are communal bakeries, beer brewers and medics who slap mud and honey on your blisters. It's hard, brutal work. But you're not chained. You're part of something. Still, Khufu's PR, not great. He gets a reputation for being cold and tyrannical. Later, Egyptian historians will accuse him of shutting down temples to fund his pyramid addiction. They say he sent his daughter into prostitution to raise funds. Seriously, ancient gossip columns were brutal. But none of that's confirmed. The real Khufu is largely silent. No grand statues of himself survive. Just his pyramid, looming and eternal. And even that has quirks. There's no real writing inside the pyramid. No spells, no hieroglyphs, no decoration. Just silence and stone. It's eerie. Scholars still debate, why was it lost? Or was the pyramid itself the message? A statement of power so overwhelming it needed no caption. You'll never know. You help place one final casing stone, watch it slide into place with a satisfying scrape, and realise it's done. The smooth surface gleams under the noonday sun, perfect and pristine. You can see the Nile snaking below and the desert stretching into nothingness. And yet it's already aging. In a few centuries, looters will strip the white casing. Wind will bite at the corners. The burial chamber will be breached. But even stripped to its core, the Great Pyramid will stand, defiant, massive, still aligned with the stars. You sit at its base, legs aching, the sun setting in a splash of molten gold. The pyramid casts a long shadow over you, like a god's eyelids slowly closing. For the first time in weeks, you're not thinking about hauling stone or dodging angry overseers. You're thinking about what this means. A man decided he didn't want to die, so he built a mountain. There's a moment, just one, when you think, surely that's the biggest pyramid we'll ever build? Yeah, no. Welcome to the Egyptian Old Kingdom's pyramid arms race, where every pharaoh with a crown and a god complex tries to outdo the last. And right after Khufu's mile-high ego leaves you sunburned and sore, his son Rajadef steps in. Now, you're expecting more grandeur, maybe another record breaker, but Rajadef has other plans. He veers off course, literally. Instead of building at Giza like his father, he heads north to Abu Rawash. You get roped into the crew headed that way, trekking past sand dunes and scrub brush, all while muttering about how this new guy better not get weird with the angles again. Spoiler, he does. Rajadef wants to distinguish himself. He's trying to break away from Khufu's legacy and plant his own flag in the divine family tree. So he chooses a rougher plateau, further out, windier, harder to build on, already a red flag. And he wants something new, a solar pyramid. You hear whispers about Ra, sun god, supreme deity, king of everything hot and blinding, being elevated to top-tier status. Rajadef isn't just building a tomb, he's building a launch pad to heaven, powered by sunbeams and divine clout. The work is harder than anything you've done at Giza. The site's elevation is brutal, the logistics a nightmare, and the limestone crumbles like stale bread. You watch cart after cart lose wheels, sleds tip, and workers curse until their voices vanish into the wind. And then it stops. Suddenly one day everything halts. Tools drop, supervisors vanish, supply boats don't arrive. The pyramid, half-formed and still bleeding rubble, is abandoned. You pack your gear and head back south, confused and underpaid. Centuries later, scholars will still argue, what happened? Some say Rajadef died early. Others claim palace intrigue, a Game of Thrones style fall from grace. Maybe his siblings didn't like how he broke tradition. Or maybe Re didn't answer his celestial call. Either way, his pyramid remains a cautionary tale. Great ambition, poor execution, lots of sand. After Rajadef, the dynasty snaps back to familiar ground. Next up is Khafra, Khufu's other son. You hear about it in the form of a royal decree shouted across a dusty town square, delivered by a guy with gold earrings and sweat stains down his sides. Construction resumes at Giza. You groan. Back you go. At first, the buzz is that Khafra's pyramid is going to be bigger than his dad's. This kicks off immediate workplace anxiety, but upon arrival you squint and realise, nope, not taller. Close, but a few feet shorter. However, and this is a classic power move, it's built on slightly higher ground, giving the illusion of height. And that's when you realise this man is playing the long game. Khafra's pyramid is no joke. The casing stones near the top are still in place when you arrive, blindingly white, cut to perfect angles. His team has learned from the past the inner chambers are tighter, the structure less mysterious, and the slope refined. This one isn't just impressive, it's confident. But Khafra doesn't stop there. Next to the pyramid he builds something different, something not seen before. You first notice it when hauling water near the edge of the plateau, an enormous lion's body carved directly from the bedrock, and on top, a human head. Yours doesn't need to be a high-ranking priest to know this is strange. Majestic, sure, but also unsettling. They call it Horem Akhet, Horus in the horizon. You'll know it later as the Great Sphinx. You're assigned to help clear sand from around its pores. The closer you get, the more massive it becomes. Its face stares eternally east, into the sunrise. It's not just a statue, it's a warning, a guardian, a cosmic bouncer posted outside the pharaoh's house. But here's the mystery that won't die. Is that really Khafra's face? Some workers swear it is. Others say it's too stylized. Even modern scholars fight over this. Some point to matching sculpture styles in Khafra's statues. Others argue the Sphinx might predate him entirely, carved by a forgotten king, later adopted into the Giza complex like an ancient Airbnb. What's clear is that the Sphinx has secrets, and the sand loves keeping them buried. Still, it's hard not to feel its power. On quiet nights, you and a few others sit by its side watching stars rise over the desert. It feels alive, like it's watching something. Maybe the horizon, maybe you. As Khafra's reign rolls on, Egypt hums with prosperity. The Nile floods reliably, temples flourish, officials multiply like locusts, but with better handwriting and religion gets an upgrade. Ra becomes supreme, absorbing local deities, expanding his portfolio like a corporate takeover. The sun is no longer just a disk, it's the eye of the gods. And Pharaoh? He's not just Ra's representative anymore, he is Ra, or at least a limited time edition. The Pharaoh's statues reflect this shift. No longer delicate or reserved, they're square-jawed, muscular, eternal. Khafra's own seated statue, found in the Valley Temple, shows him flanked by Horus the Falcon, wings curled around his head like protective earbuds. You sneak a look at it once during a supply run and feel weirdly small. You wonder if this image, the immortal king perfectly still, eyes fixed on eternity, is how the pharaohs see themselves. Maybe it's what they hope to become not remembered, unforgotten. And yet, you can't ignore the cracks. Pyramid building is slowing. Labour is tightening. You hear grumbling from scribes, delays in stone shipments, rumours of provincial governors getting a little too comfortable with their power. But for now at least the illusion of permanence holds. Khafra dies, and Egypt barely blinks. His pyramid stands, his face stares east, and the Sphinx waits, half buried in sand, like a memory refusing to fade. You don't know it yet, but the golden age of pyramids is almost over. Still, the kings haven't given up trying to outshine one another, and the next one, Menkaure, is about to try a different approach. By the time Menkaure rolls into power, you've practically become a pyramid groupie. Your joints crack like old pottery, your skin is seasoned with limestone dust, and you can gauge pyramid angles by squinting into the wind. So when the new king takes the throne and declares, "I too shall build a pyramid at Giza," you just sigh, tighten your sandals, and shuffle back toward the plateau like a veteran trudging to yet another campaign. But Menkaur's vibe is different. His pyramid, for starters, is noticeably smaller. And not just a little smaller, it's basically half the height of Khufu's mega project. At first, the crew jokes, guess the god budget got slashed. Recession pyramid. Maybe he just likes modesty. But as the months pass, the jokes fade. The work is still hard, and the site still commands respect. Menkaur's pyramid may be compact, but it's sharp, precise, elegant. The lower courses are made of pink granite hauled all the way from Aswan. That's not lazy, that's a flex. You can almost hear the king whispering, size isn't everything. Unlike his father and grandfather, Menkaur isn't trying to overwhelm. He's curating. His mortuary temple is more elaborate than his predecessors, and he seems focused on details, intricate statues, complex chamber designs, and actual art that doesn't look like it was drawn by a god with a straight-edge addiction. You're there when they unveil one of the statues. Menkaur standing with the goddess Hathor and a local deity, arms locked like drinking buddies. It's shockingly human, warm even. You don't see that often in stone. You think, maybe this guy gets it. While the pyramid rises, Egypt is still coasting on the gold-plated breeze of the Old Kingdom. There's structure, order, and predictability, but beneath it all there's tension. Scribes are grumbling more, priests are getting suspiciously rich, and provincial officials, nomarchs, are behaving like mini-pharaohs in their hometowns. You overhear one bragging that he has 3 tombs under construction, and a personal boat longer than a royal bark. That's not ambition, that's foreshadowing. But for now, the illusion holds. Menkaur's reign, though short, is remembered as just, gentle even. Not a word typically tossed around when talking about kings who demand posthumous granite fortresses. You hear tales of how he postponed a war because his dreams warned him it would offend the gods. There's even a legend, probably exaggerated, that when a prophecy said he'd die young, he fought fate by partying all night and refusing to sleep, trying to outrun death by sheer stamina. That's either deeply philosophical or the world's first energy drink ad. And yet, despite the scaled-back pyramid and limited time on the throne, Menkaur seems genuinely beloved. The priests praise him. The workers don't curse his name when hauling stone, that's rare. But here's where things get cryptic. When archaeologists crack open Menkaur's pyramid millennia later, they find something odd. A broken sarcophagus, an empty tomb, and then, in a separate chamber, a wooden coffin, dated to the Sate period, centuries after Menkaur lived. So who's actually buried here? Did looters swipe the king and stash someone else later? Did Menkaur's mummy go on walkabout? No one knows. Even weirder, the original granite sarcophagus that might have held his remains was loaded onto a ship in the 1830s, headed for England, where it would have been displayed in a museum, but the ship sank. Somewhere off the coast of Spain. The sea swallowed it. Just like that, the king vanishes again. It's almost poetic. Even in death, Menkaur refuses to be neatly packaged. He's the king who downsized, who leaned into grace, and whose final resting place is part temple, part mystery novel. Meanwhile, you've started noticing the pyramid crew shrinking. There's talk of budget cuts, fewer festivals, less free beer. The granaries are full, but the energy has shifted. People are whispering about the next king, Shepseskaf, and how he may not build a pyramid at all. You raise an eyebrow at that. No pyramid? What's next? No gods. Still, Menkaur's pyramid gets finished. Smaller, yes, but precise and beautiful. Its 3 satellite pyramids, possibly for his queens or other royal women, stand like perfect punctuation marks nearby. You help chisel a final offering table into place, and it hits you. This is the end of an era. Not just of a dynasty, but of a whole architectural philosophy. The age of pyramid building is creaking under its own weight. You sit one last time at the edge of the plateau. The sun sets behind Khufu's mountain, Khafra's fortress, and Menkaur's jewel box of a tomb. You trace your calloused fingers across a piece of granite and realize something wild. These stones have shaped your life, not just physically, but spiritually. You've lived under kings who believed death was a continuation, who built staircases to eternity out of stone and sweat. But the winds are changing. The monuments aren't getting bigger anymore. The gods are about to get crowded, and pharaohs, they're about to get paranoid. You wake to silence, and it's not the good kind. No shouting foremen, no sleds creaking, no cheerful clatter from the bread ovens in the workers' village. Just wind, and that's never a good sign in Egypt. When there's nothing but wind, it means something sacred has paused. And yeah, you can feel it. The Pyramid Age is fizzling. After Menkaure, the old spark, the one that lit up Egypt like a beacon, is dimming. The next pharaoh, Shepseskaf, does something truly scandalous. He breaks tradition, no pyramid. No smooth limestone monument rising toward the gods. Instead, he orders a long, low, rectangular tomb, a mastaba. People call it Mastabat el Pharaon, the bench of the pharaoh. You hear the gossip immediately. He's humble, say some. He's broke, say others. He's disrespecting the gods, mutter the priests, tightening their golden belts. You're drafted to the project anyway. You head south to Saqqara, where it all began with Djoser's step pyramid. There's something poetic about that. Like Egypt is circling back, trying to remember its roots while everything else feels uncertain. The tomb is solid, simple, built from massive limestone blocks but horizontal, like a giant bench rising from the sand. You help shape the blocks, less for grandeur and more for function. There are no hidden chambers, no dizzying inner ramps, just chambers, stone, and silence. Shepseskaf doesn't reign long. His tomb wraps up faster than any you've worked on before. He slips into death without fanfare. No pyramid texts, just a low stone bench and a confused workforce wondering what happens next. What happens next is uncomfortable. The fifth dynasty begins, and with it comes a new kind of Egypt. The new kings, Userkaf, Sahur, Neferakara, aren't pyramid titans. They're sun cultists, Ra is the name of the game now. Not just a god, but the god. And these new pharaohs are more interested in solar temples than in megatombs. You're sent to Abusir, a bit north of Saqqara. There, the new royal cemetery springs up, not as flashy, not as precise, but with a new kind of energy. The pyramids they build, smaller, cruder. The core is often rubble instead of carefully dressed stone. You honestly start missing the good old limestone burns of Khufu's time, but while the pyramids shrink, the temples get bigger. Specifically sun temples. The most iconic one, Nusret's Sun Temple at Abu Ghraib. It's basically a pyramid's weird cousin. You arrive and see a massive causeway, an open-air altar, and, most notably, a giant obelisk piercing the sky. No chambers, no tomb, just sunlight. All of it dedicated to Ra, god of the sun, who by now has absorbed enough smaller deities to qualify as a one-man pantheon. You help polish the walls of one such temple, watching scenes come to life. The king making offerings, the sun sailing across the sky, Ra in his solar boat defeating serpents of chaos with a glowing staff. The imagery is vivid, a little terrifying, very on brand for a culture obsessed with balance. The emphasis is clear. Pharaoh is no longer just building monuments to himself, he's building for Ra. He's a servant, a high priest, a middle manager for the divine sun engine that powers the universe. And yet the irony? The kings are getting more divine, not less. During the fourth dynasty, the pharaohs were semi-divine. Closer to the gods than you, sure, but still vaguely human. Now, they're going full-on celestial. The idea of the Ka, the divine life force, takes centre stage. The king isn't just blessed by the gods, he is one, on earth, in life, and after death. To support this cosmic career upgrade, the bureaucracy explodes. You notice it immediately. More scribes, more officials, more tax collectors. Every village has a governor. Every granary has a guy with a stylus tracking every kernel. You can't borrow a donkey without someone demanding a receipt. At first it feels like progress. But under the surface the gears are grinding. Central power is spreading itself thin. And the provincial officials? They're getting bold. You visit a village outside Abydos and see a nomarch's tomb that rivals some royal ones from a few generations back. Walls of carved scenes, family members in divine poses, lists of offerings so long they wrap around the tomb like a shopping list for the afterlife. This shouldn't be happening. There's a cosmic hierarchy. Gods on top, then Pharaoh, then everyone else. But now, the local lords are flexing. Some even call themselves Prince of the People. You feel a disturbance in the mart, and so do the priests. They just chant louder and build more solar obelisks. Back in the capital, things feel shakier. Priests of Ra are accumulating enormous wealth. They manage vast temple estates, own herds of cattle, and command massive labour forces. In some cases, their holdings rival the kings you pass a temple district and hear rumours. The priests of Heliopolis are now more powerful than the crown. Kings rely on them to keep Ra happy, but it's starting to look more like codependence than divinity. And here's where it gets fun for the historians. There's a quirky fringe theory that during this solar craze, one pharaoh, possibly Userkaf or his son, was actually trying to reform the entire religion like a proto-Akhenaten centuries early. Strip back the divine clutter. Focus on Ra as the one true force, but it didn't take. Maybe it was too early. Maybe it freaked out the goat priests. Either way, the temples were built, the sun temple stood for a time, and then the whole trend quietly faded. Still, the solar religion leaves its mark. You find yourself at the dedication of a new sun temple, standing in the shadow of a blazing obelisk. The priests chant. The king, wearing the red and white crowns of unified Egypt, offers incense. A white bull is led into the courtyard, wide-eyed and doomed. You're struck by how public it all feels. Pyramid building was private. Sacred chambers and buried secrets. Sun worship? That's for the whole crowd. You watch the king perform rituals in broad daylight, under the burning gaze of Ra, and you wonder, are we shifting from mystery to spectacle? Then again, isn't that what kings have always done? Only now, they're running out of rock. Because as the 5th dynasty winds down, the coffers are thinning, the pyramids shrink further, the priests swell larger, and the line between divine rule and desperate PR campaigns starts to blur. You feel it in your bones. Egypt's not collapsing, but it is cracking. You're sitting in the shade of a half-built granary, chewing a date that tastes suspiciously like last year's harvest, when someone mutters the word no Egyptian wants to hear: famine. The Nile hasn't flooded properly in 2 years, maybe 3. You've seen it for yourself. The water low, the banks cracked and dry. Crops fail, prices rise. Bread shrinks, beer weakens. And the priests. Oh, they chant louder than ever, throwing incense into the wind like it can bribe the gods. But the gods aren't biting. You're now deep into the 6th dynasty, and Egypt isn't what it used to be. The pyramids are small, the temples cluttered, and the people tired. It's not one thing. It's everything. The pharaohs are still in charge, technically, but their grip is slipping, especially under Pepi II. Ah yes, Pepi the patient, Pepi the undying, Pepi the exhausting. You were a teenager when he took the throne. Now you're old enough to need help carrying your water jars, and guess what? He's still ruling. By modern reckoning, Pepi II ruled for over 90 years. It's the longest reign of any monarch in recorded history. But longevity isn't always a flex. Sometimes it just means watching everything fall apart in slow motion. You remember the early days, bright-eyed officials cheering the young king, declaring a golden future. Pepi II was a child when he took power, propped up by regents and priests. He grew into a ruler with ambition, even sending expeditions deep into Nubia and beyond, chasing incense, gold, and dancing pygmies. Yeah, there's a letter. One of his generals writes home to say he found a pygmy dancer for the court. Pepi is very excited about it. But while he's busy entertaining himself and aging like a sun-dried fig, Egypt is fracturing. The provinces, those gnomes you used to joke about, have become kingdoms in all but name. Nomarchs, the governors of these regions, now pass their titles down to their sons. Some even stop pretending to answer to the pharaoh. They build their own tombs, fund their own temples, and carve their own stories into stone. You visit one such tomb in Middle Egypt. It's huge, filled with hunting scenes, banquet carvings, and inscriptions declaring eternal life to a man you've never heard of. You run your fingers over the hieroglyphs and think, this used to be for kings. Meanwhile, Memphis, still technically the capital, is less a seat of power and more a group chat that nobody checks anymore. The court is bloated with aging officials. Nothing gets done. The bureaucracy drowns in its own scrolls. Messages take months to reach the provinces, assuming the messengers don't turn around and sell the papyrus for firewood. You pass temples where the walls are crumbling. The gods still get their offerings, but the meat is lean, the bread is stale, and the statues wear expressions of eternal side-eye. Even the animals, ibises, crocodiles, falcons, look annoyed, and the people, they're fed up. You hear stories. Grain riots in the south, armed bandits in the delta, villages turning against each other for access to water. The old roads that once carried trade and tribute now carry fear. The royal family doesn't help. After Pepi II's death, finally, succession becomes a disaster. Multiple short-reigning kings pop up and vanish like flash floods. One might have been a woman, Nitocris, they say, who ruled briefly and maybe took revenge on her brother's killers by flooding a banquet hall and drowning everyone inside. You're not sure if that one's true, but honestly it feels true. That's the mood now. Egypt has entered its first full-blown identity crisis. Historians will call this the First Intermediate Period, which is just a polite way of saying no one's in charge and everything sucks. But here's the thing. The world doesn't stop. Life goes on. Fields are still planted. Children are born. Gods are worshipped. Maybe with a little less ceremony, maybe with a little more eye-rolling, but worshipped nonetheless. And in some places new voices rise. You travel to Thebes, a sleepy southern city that's suddenly getting loud. There's a family there, the Intef line, that's starting to push back. They claim legitimacy, divine blessing, access to a decent military. You attend a rally one day, well, technically a temple dedication, but it feels like a campaign event. And the local priest starts saying things like, restore Ma'at, and end the chaos of the north. It's subtle, but it's war. The Theban lords aren't just governors anymore. They're carving up their own little kingdom, what will eventually become the 11th dynasty. Meanwhile, in the north, other warlords and self-proclaimed kings do the same. Egypt, once unified under Narmer's double crown, is now a mosaic of fortified city-states, all pretending to be the real deal. You pass a town square where a scribe is reading aloud from a text called the Admonitions of Ipuwer. It's a wild document, part prophecy, part social critique, part doomsday poetry. It says things like, the poor have become rich, the river is blood, and there is no more order. You glance around, children with hollow eyes, temples closed, dust choking the fields. Maybe Ipuwer's being dramatic, maybe he's just right. And yet, amid the chaos, there's freedom. Without the heavy shadow of the old pharaohs, local innovation blooms. Art becomes regional, architecture shifts, new writing styles appear. Tombs reflect personal stories instead of state propaganda. It's messy, but it's real. Less eternal, more human. And sure, maybe no one knows who's actually in charge. But in a strange way, Egypt is breathing again. The river still flows, the stars still rise. And somewhere, just beyond the curve of the desert, a new pharaoh is waiting. A warrior, a reformer, a man ready to put the pieces back together. You hear the drums before you see the soldiers. It starts as a low thump in the hills above Thebes, echoing like distant thunder. Then the horns cut through the morning haze, and the whole valley knows something is different. You grab your cloak, half-eaten barley cake still in your hand, and head toward the commotion. The whispers fly like starlings. Mentuhotep is marching. He's crossed into Abydos. He's not stopping. You've heard the name before, Mentuhotep II, a local Theban king, quietly gathering strength while Egypt's north fumbled with half-kings and nostalgia. Now, he's not so quiet. Word is he's coming to end the chaos, to reunify Egypt, to wear the double crown like Narmer did centuries ago, bold, maybe crazy. But you're intrigued. You head south to Thebes, drawn in like a moth to a bonfire. The city buzzes with purpose. Bakers rising before dawn, blacksmiths hammering out spear tips, priests blessing soldiers in temple courtyards, and at the centre of it all Mentuhotep, tall, intense, wrapped in linen dyed deep red, the colour of power, blood and rebirth. His soldiers aren't palace guards or royal pamperlings. They're battle-hardened men from the south, farmers turned warriors, marching under banners with falcons and burning suns. You walk among them, trading dried fish for stories. They speak of skirmishes in Heracleopolis, of victories in Middle Egypt, of a war that's less about blood and more about legitimacy. This isn't just a power grab, it's a restoration. After years of decentralization, of petty kings and collapsing institutions, Mentuhotep wants to stitch the country back together. Not with proclamations, with action. You watch as he offers sacrifices at Karnak, invoking a moon, then still a minor god of wind and mystery, but about to have a major glow-up. The message is clear. The gods are with him. And if they're not, well, he has enough spears to convince them otherwise. The campaign is long. You follow the stories as he pushes north, slowly eating up territories like a game of Senate played in blood and dust. The north resists. Cities like Heracleopolis mount fierce defences, but one by one they fall. And when he finally reunites Egypt years later, he doesn't just build a throne. He builds a statement. You're drafted, of course, to the construction site in Deir el-Bahari, just west of Thebes. It's unlike anything you've seen before. Carved into the cliffs like the gods took a chisel to the mountains, Mentuhotep's mortuary complex rises from the desert like a sacred mirage. Gone is the triangle. This is no pyramid. It's layered terraces, wide ramps, colonnades flanked by statues of the king in Osiride form, arms crossed, holding the crook and flail, wrapped like a mummy. You walk among the pillars, dusting stone, smoothing carvings, and think, this isn't just a tomb, it's a manifesto. Mentuhotep II declares himself son of Ra and the living Horus, but more than that, he ties himself to Osiris, god of the dead and ruler of the underworld. He's not just living forever, he's rising again like the Nile itself, a resurrected king for a resurrected Egypt. The art here is different too, more expressive, more colourful. You help mix pigment for a frieze of papyrus reeds, and note how even the workers are portrayed with round cheeks and real posture. Life is seeping back into the stone, and the administration? It's tightening up. Scribes reappear in force, but this time with even more oversight. There's a new emphasis on record-keeping, taxes, grain distribution. You now need 3 stamped documents just to move a donkey through town. Annoying? Yes, but you admit, it feels stable again. Religion is also shifting. The Theban gods, especially Amun, are rising fast. He's merging with Ra now, becoming Amun-Ra, king of gods. You pass a temple where his priests are holding a festival, hoisting his bark through the streets in a river of incense and music. The people cheer, the drums pound, and you realise this is more than belief. It's momentum. But like all kings, Mentuhotep eventually dies. His tomb, carved into the cliffs, becomes a sacred space. Pilgrims come to offer prayers. You come too, laying down a small painted scarab, not for luck, for thanks. After years of drought, civil war, and dead-end rulers, someone finally put Egypt back on its feet. The Middle Kingdom has begun. Scholars call this the classical age of ancient Egypt. You just call it, finally, some peace. Under Mentuhotep's successors, things grow, literally. Canals are dug, land reclaimed, granaries filled. You walk through the Fayum Basin and marvel at new farmland stretching where marsh once ruled trade picks up. Goods from Syria, Nubia, Punt, exotic animals, perfume, myrrh. Your senses are overwhelmed. Art and literature bloom too. The old tomb inscriptions, once formulaic, now tell real stories. Biographies, struggles, reflections. You read one on the wall of a small noble's tomb. I gave bread to the hungry, water to the thirsty, clothing to the naked. It's human. It feels honest. But even in this Renaissance, the echoes of collapse linger. Everyone remembers the first intermediate period. They speak of it like a ghost in the walls. A reminder, Egypt is strong, but not immortal. Which is maybe why the kings now rule with a bit more humility. They're divine, sure, but they know that without the loyalty of the provinces, the priests, the scribes, and the farmers, they're just another guy in a fancy hat. You lie back one night outside Thebes, the cliffs of Deir el-Bahari behind you, the stars hanging like delicate beads overhead. You think of Mentuhotep, of pyramids long buried in the sand, of temples to Ra and whispers to Osiris. Egypt isn't perfect, but it's whole again, and for now, that's enough. You're staring at a map, hand-drawn on faded linen, corners fraying, ink smudged by sweat. It shows rivers, roads, and border fortresses, and more than a few places you're pretty sure were made up on the spot. But what catches your eye is the one word written with extra emphasis, in bold calligraphy, Nubia. That's where you're going. The Middle Kingdom is shifting gears. Peace is great, but expansion, that's where the glory is. And the kings of the 12th dynasty, starting with Amenemhat I, aren't content to just fix Egypt, they want to fortify it. The first isn't born royal. He's likely a commoner, or at best a provincial official, who stages one of the most elegant coups in Egyptian history. You hear the rumours swirl while you're planting barley. The king is dead. A new one has risen. There was a prophecy. There was definitely murder. Maybe all of the above. To prove he's not just some guy with a lucky knife, Amenemhat does what smart pharaohs do. He builds, not just monuments, but systems. He moves the capital north to a new city called Ichtawi, near the Fayum you visit once. It's cleaner than Memphis, better irrigated, less full of old palace weirdos. But the big focus? The borders. Nubia to the south has always been a bit of a frenemy, rich in gold, copper, ivory and incense, also rich in unpredictable uprisings. So Amenemhat and his successors begin a series of campaigns to dominate it, turning Egypt from an inward-facing kingdom into an aggressive armoured empire in progress. And that's how you end up stationed at a fortress called Semna, deep in the Nile's southern corridor. It's one of several, massive stone forts lining the river like beads on a defensive necklace. You and your unit are here to control trade, collect tribute, and keep the Nubians in line. That last part gets complicated. The local Nubian tribes, like the Medjay, are proud, resilient, and not exactly thrilled about being taxed by sun-worshipping northerners in animal print kilts. You spend weeks manning a tower, sweating under the desert sun, watching for dust trails that might signal a raid, or a caravan. Hard to tell from a distance. The fortress itself is impressive. Stone walls thick enough to withstand battering, with internal barracks, storerooms, and narrow slits for archers. There's even a small temple where you sneak in on the off days and leave offerings to Amun, hoping he keeps the snakes away from your bedroll. But you're not just guarding, you're observing. Every interaction with the Nubians is recorded by scribes. What they trade, what they wear, who they worship. It's cultural intelligence, wrapped in bureaucracy. Egypt's not just interested in dominance, it wants knowledge. Meanwhile, back in Egypt proper, Amenemhat's reign ends not with a bang, but with a dagger. He's likely assassinated, though the official story is he just died peacefully. His son Senusret takes over, and here's where things really get imperial. Senusret is a warrior king. He strengthens the southern forts, expands Egypt's reach, and builds a reputation for being everywhere at once. He launches military campaigns, oversees irrigation projects, and still finds time to add temples and obelisks across the Nile Valley, like he's ticking boxes off a divine to-do list. You're back in Ichtawi by the time his greatest architectural legacy is unveiled, the White Chapel at Karnak. It's stunning. Carved limestone columns, clean lines, inscriptions celebrating the unification of Egypt and the taming of foreign lands. You run your hands along the reliefs, rows of bound prisoners, offerings to Amun, records of triumph. You see Senusret's face over and over, calm and ageless. But there's a quiet tension rising beneath all this glory. The succession system, while officially orderly, is messy behind closed doors. Co-regencies, where the pharaoh crowns his heir while still alive, become the new norm, supposedly to ensure smooth transitions. In practice, it's a stress-fueled power-sharing experiment between ambitious sons and aging kings. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you have to admit, the 12th dynasty keeps things running. After Senusret I comes Amenemhat II, then Senusret II, then Senusret III, and this last one. He changes everything. Senusret III is not playing around. His face alone tells you that. Gone are the serene, idealized features of earlier pharaohs. His statues show a scowling, tired man with heavy eyes and prominent ears. This is a king who wants you to know he's been through it. He's probably the most powerful pharaoh since the Old Kingdom, and he knows it. You're sent to his mortuary complex near Abydos, and it's clear. The man doesn't want a pyramid for ego. He wants a fortress for the afterlife. His tomb is heavy, angular, and guarded like it still has enemies, which to be fair it might. Senusret III reforms everything. The nomarchs, gone, or at least stripped of power. He centralises authority so hard it makes Pipi II look like a camp counsellor. He establishes clearer borders, cracks down on corruption, and pushes deep into Nubia, building more forts, collecting more tribute. You feel the shift. Egypt is no longer just building for eternity, it's managing an empire. You're part of a complex machine now, more organised, more militarised, and way more efficient at grinding out both taxes and enemies. But it's not all conquest and stonework. The Middle Kingdom is also a literary explosion. You stumble across a scribe school in Thebes and peek inside. The students are copying texts with titles like The Tale of the Shipwrecked Sailor and The Story of Sinuhe. These aren't just political propaganda. They're stories, with emotion, with moral complexity. They reflect a society asking questions, not just about the gods, but about people. You hear recitations in marketplaces and temple courtyards. A character in one story weeps under a sycamore. In another, a king laughs. These aren't the cardboard gods of the Old Kingdom, they're real. And even you, sweaty labourer turned fortress veteran, start to feel something change. Egypt isn't chasing eternity anymore, it's living in time. You return briefly to the Fayum, now transformed by Senusret II into a lush, agricultural basin through a series of canals and dams. The air smells of new grain and wet reeds. The people smile more. There's stability, not perfection, but predictability, which in Egypt might be better than paradise. As the Middle Kingdom continues, you realise something. The pyramids are smaller, the gods more abstract, the kings more human, but somehow it all feels closer. You look at Senusret III's tired stone face and see not a god, but a man trying to hold the sky together with bare hands. It starts with silence again. But this time, not the heavy kind, the ominous, something's wrong kind. This silence is hollow, the kind that follows a feast when the last cup's been drained. The music's stopped, and all that's left are crumbs and cold coals. You feel it walking through Thebes, through the canals of the Fayum, even in the temples of Karnak where the incense still rises, but the prayers feel a little thinner. The Middle Kingdom, once so loud with ambition, has begun to mumble. When Amenemhat III takes the throne, it's like the final movement of a long, brilliant symphony. He's the last truly great king of the 12th dynasty, a ruler with vision, energy, and enough builder's instinct to make Khufu nod in approval. But even as he launches grand projects, you sense he's fighting gravity. Not just literal gravity, like the stone blocks that keep collapsing on his over-engineered tombs, but the slow gravitational pull of decline. Still, let's give him his due. Amenemhat III is obsessed with water, with harnessing it, taming it. You get assigned to a crew deep in the Fayum Basin, where he revives and expands an epic engineering project, Lake Moris. It's a natural lake that he transforms into a giant reservoir, fed by the Nile through a system of dikes, canals, and clever hydrology. It's not glamorous work. You spend days up to your thighs in mud, slapping mosquitoes the size of pigeons and arguing about sluice gate measurements. But the result is breathtaking. Entire new fields appear, rich with wheat and barley. Villages pop up along the water's edge. You hear people calling Amenemhat the one who made the fields breathe, which is a little dramatic, but hey, you're not correcting anyone with free beer rations. And then there's his masterpiece, the labyrinth. No, not the mythological one with the Minotaur. This is the real Egyptian labyrinth, a vast temple and administrative complex near Hawara, beside his pyramid. You get a glimpse of it during a harvest festival, and your jaw drops. Over 3,000 rooms, chambers and courtyards carved into stone. It's a bureaucratic fever dream, designed to house everything from royal archives to priestly chambers to tax ledgers. You hear Greek travellers centuries later will claim it's one of the wonders of the world. Even Herodotus will wander through its halls and say, yeah, the pyramids are cool, but this? But the pyramid next to it, Amenemhat III's personal eternity project, is cursed. Okay, maybe not cursed, but something's off. Called the Black Pyramid due to the decayed colour of its mud brick core, it has structural issues from the get-go. The walls crack, the chambers warp, water seeps in like it's got a grudge. The workers groan. You help reinforce one wall and find the stone groaning like a living thing. Eventually, the pharaoh has to give up on it. Embarrassing, sure, but also very on brand for this era. Grand ideas built on shaky foundations. So he tries again. Further south, at Hawara, Amenemhat III builds a second pyramid. Smaller, smarter. You help shape one of the casing blocks, feeling the shift. Not just in architecture, but in attitude. He's still a king, still divine, but less immortal, more practical. And that's kind of where Egypt is now. You walk the streets and notice fewer soldiers, fewer scribes, but more local leaders with fat rings and fatter goats. The central government is still there, but its edges are fraying again. Nomarchs are creeping back into power. Temples are getting bossier, and foreign traders, they're getting bold. You meet some at a dock along the Red Sea, Canaanites, Levantines, Libyans. They bring wine, timber, animals you've only seen in dream murals, but they also bring influence. Some even settle here. You start hearing non-Egyptian names pop up in markets, on contracts, on gossip scrolls. Egypt, once so proudly isolated, is becoming porous. And with Amenemhat III's death, things wobble harder. His successor, Amenemhat IV, reigns for less than a decade. Then a female pharaoh takes over, Sobekneferu. You hear the announcement while sipping date wine in the courtyard. A woman king, someone mutters. A daughter of Ra. And then, after a pause, well, okay. To her credit, Sobekneferu rules capably and doesn't try to hide behind a fake beard or a rewritten gender. She just rules. She maintains the bureaucracy, finishes temples, and keeps things running. But after her death, the line of succession snaps like an overcooked reed. Welcome to the 13th dynasty. You can't keep track anymore. Kings come and go like bad market singers. Some rule for years, others for weeks. You wake up to new names being carved into temple walls before the last ones are even finished. The bureaucracy tries to act like everything's fine. Scribes furiously scratching records onto scrolls that are outdated before the ink dries. And yet, Egypt doesn't collapse, not immediately. People adapt. Trade continues. Farmers still plant. Priests still chant. Life finds its rhythm, even as power thins. It's like watching a great ship slow to a crawl, still afloat, but drifting. Meanwhile, something's happening in the northeast. You catch wind of it through travellers. A strange people crossing into the delta. They're called the Hyksos. Western Asiatic nomads, possibly from Canaan or Syria. At first, they come peacefully, trading, herding, settling. Then more come, and more, and more. At first, the Egyptians shrug. Let them farm the marshes, someone says. They'll get bored. Spoiler, they do not get bored. Over time, these foreigners gather strength. They organise, build cities. One of them, Avaris, starts to look suspiciously like a capital. You hear the Hyksos have horses, chariots, bronze weapons, innovations Egypt hasn't fully caught up with. Suddenly, those quaint delta settlements start looking like forward operating bases. And then one day, it happens. The Hyksos take Memphis. You get the news in a tavern in Thebes. A dusty traveller with cracked lips stumbles in, mumbles the headline and collapses. Silence spreads. Cups stop mid-air. Bread falls to the floor. Someone laughs nervously. That's impossible. It's not. The Hyksos now control Lower Egypt. They declare themselves kings, pharaohs even. They adopt Egyptian titles, worship Egyptian gods, well, some of them, and wrap themselves in linen like they were born under the Nile sun. But everyone knows they're not Egyptian, not really. And in Thebes, where the 17th dynasty clings to what's left of native rule, you hear the murmurs of resistance growing louder. Because Egypt has been invaded before, but it's never been owned, not like this. You've lived through droughts, dynasties, and enough construction projects to develop permanent sandstone in your lungs. But this feels different. The north is gone. The Hyksos control the delta, those sprawling papyrus marshes, trade ports, and the once glorious city of Memphis. You get the sense they didn't conquer Egypt so much as move in while no one was paying attention. Now they rule it like they've always been here. And the weirdest part? Some Egyptians are fine with it. Not everyone, though, especially not in Thebes. Down here in the south, in what's left of native-controlled Upper Egypt, people are tense. They're polite about it, sure, because Egypt loves order, but it's the kind of polite where people keep knives under their linen belts. You're in Thebes when you first hear the phrase, "the foreign kings shall fall." It's spoken softly, like a prayer, or a curse. By now, the native royal house, the 17th dynasty, is still holding on to scraps of power. The pharaohs don't rule Egypt anymore. They rule a stretch of land from Elephantine to a little north of Abydos, maybe, on a good day, but they still wear the crowns, and they are not giving up. You see this firsthand with a king named Seqenenre, a fierce man with a name that means he who strikes like Ra. You like that, has a ring to it. He's young, charismatic, and famously ticked off. His target? Apophis, the Hyksos pharaoh up in Avaris who's taken Egyptian culture, draped it around himself like a golden curtain, and started acting like he owns the place. According to one popular tale, Apophis sends Seqenenre a letter, demanding he do something about the hippos in Thebes, because their nighttime bellowing is disturbing the peace all the way in Avaris, which geographically is nonsense. You laugh. Everyone laughs. But it's not funny. It's a power play, a subtle threat, a way of saying, I can reach you whenever I want. Seqenenre doesn't respond with words, he responds with weapons. The war begins slowly. Border skirmishes, sabotage, raiding supply lines. You hear rumours of soldiers ambushing Hyksos patrols near Kusai, then melting back into the reeds. The Thebans are scrappy, fighting like wolves guarding their last den. You volunteer. You're too old to be on the front line, but they still need men to dig fortifications, ferry supplies, tend the wounded. You serve at a forward station near Abydos, patching chariots and learning that horses, yes, horses, are no longer mythological animals mentioned by merchants. The Hyksos brought them in, along with the chariot, and it's changing the way war is fought. Egypt, famously slow to innovate, is finally paying attention. Seqenenre dies in battle. You hear it from a breathless courier with a cracked helmet and dried blood on his face. The king's body is brought back to Thebes, scarred, brutalized, skull smashed. You catch a glimpse at the funerary rites. Even the priests can't hide their horror. It's clear he died fighting, and that changes everything. Seqenenre becomes a martyr, a fallen king, defending Egypt against foreign rule. Songs are written, statues are carved, mothers name their sons after him. His children swear they'll finish the fight. Next up is Khamos, his son, or maybe brother. The royal line's gotten blurry, but either way he is fire incarnate. Khamos isn't interested in playing defence. He launches full-on offensives against the Hyksos. You're stationed near the front lines when Khamos' troops retake several key cities. The army moves like it has a personal vendetta, burning Hyksos supply depots, toppling steles, and broadcasting messages carved into stone for all of Egypt to see. In one now famous inscription, Khamos declares that he'll drive the Asiatics into the sea. Bold, messy, beautiful, but then he dies too, maybe in battle, maybe illness. The record goes quiet for a breath. Then comes the name that changes Egypt forever, Ahmose I. You first hear it whispered by soldiers cleaning their spears, then shouted by priests invoking Amun, then sung by farmers planting barley under the Nile's shy return to normal floods. Ahmose is young when he takes the throne, maybe 10, but he's trained from birth for war. You see him once, briefly, during a military parade in Thebes. He's not large, not booming with presence like the older kings, but there's a stillness to him, a calculating calm, the kind that makes you step back and watch your tone. And when he comes of age, he unleashes hell. Ahmose reorganizes the army, learns from the Hyksos. He adopts their weapons, sickle swords, composite bows, chariots, and turns them against their makers. You serve as a porter in the logistics train, following behind as the army pushes northward, taking back city after city, inching closer to Avaris. The siege is long, brutal. You spend days reinforcing camps, sharpening copper blades, watching flames rise from enemy forts across the river. The air smells like dust and oil and burned grain. Finally, Avaris falls. The Hyksos, once rulers of Lower Egypt, are driven out. Some flee into the Levant, others vanish. Apophis disappears like a ghost caught in a sandstorm. No royal burial, no last words, just silence. And suddenly the land is whole again. Ahmose becomes more than a king. He becomes the restorer of the two lands. You watch as the double crown is placed on his head, and Egypt, for the first time in over a century, belongs fully to Egyptians again. But Ahmose doesn't stop there. He pushes south, into Nubia, crushing uprisings and reasserting Egyptian control over the gold-rich territories that once powered Middle Kingdom opulence. Then he pushes east, into the Sinai, re-establishing mines and trade routes the Hyksos had seized. You return to Thebes in time to witness his building spree. The temples at Karnak expand. Amun's cult grows. Ahmose commissions new construction, new art, new systems. The bureaucracy returns, but this time with military muscle behind it. And you? You finally feel like Egypt is back, but not the old Egypt. This is a new creature, more aggressive, more aware of the world beyond its borders, more capable of projecting power. What Ahmose begins is what historians will later call the New Kingdom, a time of glory, of conquest, of gods given faces and kings given immortality and stone. You walk through Thebes one night, the streets alive with chanting, the temples glowing with torchlight. Somewhere in the distance a scribe reads aloud a list of new building projects, a new fort in Nubia, a new port near the Red Sea, a new granary in the Delta. Egypt, it seems, has remembered who she is. And now, she wants the world to remember too. It's dawn in Thebes, and the river fog curls low across the Nile like a ghost rising from its tomb. You walk along the riverbank, sandals sticky with dew, and feel it in your chest. The kingdom is waking up differently, meaner, hungry, because Egypt isn't just back. Egypt is about to go global. You're now living in the early New Kingdom, and the reign of Thutmose I is in full swing. If Ahmose was the restorer, Thutmose is the expander, the first pharaoh to take Egypt beyond its old borders and keep going. North into Syria, south into Nubia. You thought you'd seen enough of war in the Hyksos days? Thutmose is just getting started. He's not born into royalty, mind you. He's probably a military man promoted to king through marriage or sheer competence. You can respect that. And as a soldier, he knows what soldiers need. Weapons, chariots, and something to fight for. You're drafted into a support corps, not for pyramid building, not for temple sweeping, but for war. That's new. You spend weeks marching down into Nubia, supplying troops with grain and whetstones while they push into lands that once belonged to Egypt and then far beyond. The big shift here? Permanent occupation. Thutmose doesn't just smash and dash. He builds forts, stations garrisons, appoints Egyptian governors. The message is clear. This isn't a raid, it's an annexation. Nubia, rich in gold and manpower, is now a vital limb of the empire. And in the north, even bolder. Thutmose crosses the Euphrates. That's Mesopotamian territory, Assyria-adjacent, god-soaked dirt that Egypt had only ever heard about in trade whispers. He sails past the river like it's just another canal and stakes a victory steely in the foreign soil like it's nothing, like, yeah, I was here. What of it? You can feel the swagger. Back in Thebes, there's celebration. You return from the campaign to find Karnak Temple twice the size it was before you left. The priests of Amun are growing richer than ever, thanks in no small part to the king's gifts, which include chests of loot from conquered cities and a lot of gold from Nubia. Amun, once a relatively obscure wind deity, is now the god of gods. You walk through the precinct of Karnak and feel the weight of it. Columns thick as grain silos, painted with stars, statues of Thutmose in heroic poses, inscriptions praising him as beloved of Amun. You see what's happening. The king and the god are in an arrangement. One builds temples, the other builds legitimacy. And yet, amid all this power, there's a quieter force rising in the background. Her name is Hatshepsut. You meet her only in passing, watching from a crowd as she attends a temple procession in full royal regalia. Her posture steady, her expression unreadable. She's Thutmose the first daughter, married to his son Thutmose the second. Yeah, royal family trees are a bit incestuous. And when her husband dies young, she steps in as regent for her stepson, the boy king Thutmose III. At first, no one expects much. Then she starts ruling, really ruling. Years pass and she doesn't step aside. She steps forward. You watch as her name appears not just as queen, but as pharaoh. She commissions statues of herself wearing the false beard of kingship. She is addressed as His Majesty. The scribes quietly adjust the grammar. Some say it's blasphemy, others say it's genius. You think it's bold? And her reign? Unmatched. Hatshepsut doesn't throw spears, she throws trade expeditions. One of the most famous sets sail from the Red Sea to a mysterious land called Punt, a place of incense trees, exotic animals, and enough gold to glaze an obelisk. You work the docks in Thebes when the expedition returns. It's like a carnival parade. Monkeys, frankincense saplings, ebony, leopard skins, and gold trinkets. You swear one of the sailors has a giraffe on a leash. At Deir el-Bahari, Hatshepsut builds her mortuary temple. Not a pyramid, not a mastaba, but a terraced masterpiece carved into the cliffs, designed to reflect the cliffs themselves. You help haul limestone for the ramps, passing through colonnades painted with scenes of divine birth and foreign lands. One shows her mother being impregnated by Amun himself, while gods hover and midwives panic in golden brushstrokes. Subtle? Not really. Effective? Absolutely. Hatshepsut wraps herself in divinity so tightly that most people forget to ask if any of this is technically allowed. By the time she's firmly in power, the people call her Matkare. Truth is the soul of Ra. You get the sense that she's not just a female king, she's an idea. And then, after over 20 years on the throne, she disappears. No drama, no rebellion, just gone. Her stepson, Thutmose III, finally takes full power, and he's been waiting. You see his name slowly start replacing hers. Her statues, pulled down. Her inscriptions, chiselled off walls. Scholars today argue about why was it revenge, a political rewrite, or just royal branding clearing the slate for his own legacy. Whatever the reason, he erases her like she was never there. But you remember. And so does Deir el-Bahari. Thutmose III doesn't just erase, he conquers. If Thutmose I was ambitious, Thutmose III is unstoppable. He launches 17 military campaigns in 20 years, seizes territory from the Euphrates to the fourth cataract of the Nile. He builds an empire so wide it practically blinks in different time zones. The jewel of his military career. The Battle of Megiddo. You weren't there, but everyone talks about it. How he took the unexpected mountain route to surprise his enemies. How the Canaanite coalition panicked and fled behind the walls of Megiddo. How the Egyptians laid siege and won so decisively. The name Megiddo would echo down through history, eventually becoming Armageddon. You read the victory inscriptions at Karnak. They're poetic, brutal, almost smug. One line boasts, "The fear of me is in the lands, the terror of me in the hearts of men." You believe it. Thutmose III also brings back plunder, so much you think he must have personally walked into every palace in Syria and asked, "Can I take this?" He also brings back ideas. Foreign styles influence Egyptian art. New breeds of animals appear in royal menageries. Even foreign princes are brought to Egypt, raised as hostages, educated in Theban schools. It's part strategy, part propaganda, but don't get it twisted. This isn't soft power. This is the height of Egypt's imperial age. You stand on a temple balcony in Thebes, watching the banners wave, the incense rise, the river glisten like liquid gold. Soldiers march in the streets, priests chant in booming unison. The city feels like the centre of the universe. And maybe it is. But as the empire grows, so does the pressure. You can't help but wonder, how long can Egypt hold it all together? Because power expands fast. But it breaks even faster. It's late afternoon in Thebes, and you're sheltering beneath the edge of a half-finished colonnade, sipping a cracked jug of warm beer, when a group of artisans nearby starts joking about the latest royal statue commission. "It's for her," one whispers. "You mean him," another corrects, raising an eyebrow. No, the first grins. "I mean her, the one with the fake beard and all the incense." You roll your eyes. They're talking about Hatshepsut again, even though she's been gone for years. Officially she's been erased, remember? But she's still here, in the gossip, in the art they keep accidentally copying, and in the memory of the kingdom she helped shape. But now Egypt belongs to Amenhotep II, the son of Thutmose III, and let's be clear, this guy is jacked. You first see him at a chariot parade in Memphis, where he demonstrates his bow skills by shooting arrows through copper targets while galloping full speed. It's a lot. You've seen kings boast before, sure, but this guy leans into it hard. His inscriptions are full of muscular metaphors. He doesn't just conquer, he crushes, doesn't just rule, he dominates. He writes that he killed 7 enemy princes with his own hands and strung their bodies upside down on the prow of his boat, one of them, sent to be hung on the city walls in Nubia for branding. But here's the thing, under all that testosterone, you sense a little anxiety. Amenhotep II inherited a kingdom stretched to its limit. His dad, Thutmose III, had conquered half the Near East and brought back a tidal wave of loot, culture and tribute. Now, the pressure is on to hold it, to maintain Egypt's dominance without crumbling under the weight of empire. So Amenhotep II keeps the army sharp. He builds fortresses along key trade routes, and he makes sure his vassals in Syria and Canaan know exactly who's in charge. You overhear a scribe reading a letter from a city-state in Byblos practically begging the king for help. He doesn't even need to reply, just the idea of Egypt is enough to keep most of them in line. But back home, Egypt's changing in quieter ways. You notice it first in the temples. Karnak is growing again, like some kind of stone jungle spreading outward with every new pharaoh. Obelisks, pylons, processional avenues. The priests of Amun are basically living in marble palaces now, managing land, collecting taxes, and quietly building a kingdom within the kingdom. You watch one priest walk past with 6 attendants and a leopard skin sash that looks like it cost more than your house. He doesn't even glance at you. Why would he? You're just a labourer. But he knows what you know. Amun is rising, not just as a god, but as a force. His temples receive massive endowments. His image dominates public art. His name is fused with Ra to form Amun-Ra, the king of gods. And every king now has to play nice with the priesthood or risk spiritual and political backlash. Amenhotep II walks this line carefully. He honours Amun in his temples, sure, but you can tell he's not totally thrilled with how powerful the priesthood has become. There's a tug-of-war happening between crown and crook, throne and altar. It'll get worse later. You don't know it yet, but a religious earthquake is coming. For now, though, the court is all about stability. You serve briefly at a building site in western Thebes, near the tombs of nobles. You carve offering scenes into limestone, showing rows of jars, baskets, and wine amphorae. The nobles are proud to be buried here, in the shadow of the Valley of the Kings, where the pharaohs are now hiding their tombs deep in the cliffs to thwart robbers. No more flashy pyramids, just secret passageways, cursed doors, and walls painted with spells to guide the dead through the afterlife. You talk with one of the painters during a lunch break, and he tells you about the Book of the Dead, a new trend in tomb literature. It's a guidebook, a manual, step-by-step instructions for navigating the underworld. Which gates to pass, which demons to name-drop, which questions to answer when your heart is weighed against a feather. You ask what happens if your heart's heavier. He shrugs. You get eaten by a monster with a crocodile head, lion body, and hippo butt. Comforting. In your spare time, you visit the markets of Thebes, where Syrian merchants sell incense and Anatolian traders barter for papyrus. The air smells like spice and linen. People are talking about a new wine from the Levant that has figs and honey. You try some. It's terrible, but you pretend to like it, because it makes you feel sophisticated. And then, one day, everything shifts again. Amenhotep II dies, and his son, Thutmose IV, takes the throne. The guy was never supposed to be king, probably a younger son with low expectations, but fate has a sense of humour. You hear the legend almost immediately. Young Thutmose was out hunting near the Sphinx, dozed off in its shadow, and had a dream. The Sphinx spoke to him, promising kingship if he would clear the sand from its body. A dusty bribe, but apparently it worked. He clears the sand, he becomes king. He even leaves behind a massive dream stele between the Sphinx's paws, carved with the full bedtime prophecy, you go to see it once. It's a little self-indulgent, but honestly, it's got charm. You start calling him the Nap King. Thutmose IV is more diplomatic than his father, less into chariot flexes, more into smoothing over Egypt's borders. He marries a Mitanni princess, establishing good relations with northern powers. He's also a builder, adding his mark to temples all over the country. His reign is stable, calm, almost quiet. But it's the calm before a storm, because his son, Amenhotep III, is waiting in the wings, and he is not subtle. You've seen kings who wanted to be remembered, kings who built, conquered, named cities after themselves, but you haven't seen this yet. Amenhotep III is going to take Egypt to its absolute peak. No more conquering, no more war campaigns, just gold, gods, and god-level ego. So while you chisel hieroglyphs in some forgotten noble's tomb, unaware of the fireworks about to go off, Amenhotep III is already planning palaces bigger than cities. He's going to call himself a god. And Egypt? She's going to believe him. You'd think after centuries of kings building pyramids, temples, and occasionally erasing each other from history, the whole divine pharaoh thing would start to feel like just a really elaborate PR campaign. But then Amenhotep III walks in, and suddenly it's not a campaign. It's a full-blown reality show, staged by the gods, produced by gold, and directed by a man who absolutely, without question, believes he is divine. You're there the day they announce his coronation. Thebes practically vibrates with music and incense. Trumpets blare, dancers flood the avenues, and the scent of lotus fills the air so heavily you can barely taste your lunch. This isn't just a new king, it's the launch of a brand. Amenhotep III becomes king as a teenager, and from the start he's not interested in conquest. Egypt's enemies are quiet, its trade routes are open, its granaries are full, so instead of war he wages opulence. You're assigned to one of his early building projects, and it's like nothing you've worked on before. There's a new kind of ambition in the air, not just to build for eternity, but to flex, and Amenhotep is the ultimate flexor. Take his palace at Malkata. It's not a tomb, not a temple. It's a luxury complex on the west bank of the Nile, larger than some cities, complete with audience halls, artificial lakes, gardens and warehouses for luxury goods. You help stack painted tiles in one of the guest rooms, and the walls are already covered with scenes of wild animals, blue lotuses, and lavish banquet scenes. You wonder if the king even sleeps in the same room twice. And then there's the Colossi of Memnon, those two 60-foot statues of Amenhotep III seated like he's waiting for the gods to catch up. They guard the entrance to what was once his mortuary temple, the largest ever built. You remember helping to ferry the stone blocks, each weighing more than your entire neighbourhood. Now here's the part where things start to go a little sideways. As the years pass, Amenhotep doesn't just lean into his godhood, he becomes it. He calls himself the dazzling sun disk, son of Ra, the living Horus. Okay, sure, pretty standard. But then he starts appearing in temples alongside the gods, not just worshipping them but standing next to them as equals. You visit Karnak and see a new relief showing the king being suckled by the goddess Hathor, as if to say, yes, I'm divine. And also, yes, I was breastfed by eternity itself. You're welcome. The priests of Amun go along with it, of course. They're smart. They know where the bread is buttered. But even they seem a little overwhelmed by the sheer volume of worship Amenhotep demands. And then he builds something odd. A giant artificial lake. Yes, an actual lake. One day, Amenhotep just decides that what Egypt is really missing is a vast body of water next to his palace. So he digs one. It takes thousands of workers and months of labour. You pass it one evening and see boats gliding over the surface under strings of lanterns. Rumour has it the king celebrated his Sed festival, the royal rejuvenation ceremony, by sailing on it with hundreds of rowers and a personal band. And about that festival, most kings wait 30 years to celebrate it. Amenhotep starts throwing them early, like birthday parties for himself. You hear someone say, when you're a god, you don't wait for anniversaries. But here's what sets his reign apart even more: diplomacy. You've always known Egypt sees itself as the centre of the world, but under Amenhotep III, the court begins treating foreign kings like their distant cousins. He writes letters, hundreds of them, to rulers in Babylonia, Mitanni, Hatti. You're at a scribal school when a copy of one arrives. It's clay, written in Akkadian cuneiform, the diplomatic language of the day. It reads more like royal small talk than strategy. My brother, I send you gold. Please send me more lapis lazuli. Also, how is your daughter doing? Sometimes these letters include marriage proposals. Amenhotep marries multiple foreign princesses. Some arrive in gold-laden caravans with dowries so massive the Nile practically blushes. You help carry gifts into one of the royal storage halls. Jewellery, perfume, wild animals, spices. You don't even know what half of it is, but it smells expensive. Notably, No Egyptian princesses are sent abroad. When Babylon asks for one, Amenhotep flatly refuses. Our women don't marry foreigners, the reply says. A subtle reminder, this is not an equal relationship. Still, not everything during his reign is gold-leafed perfection. Out in the provinces you hear murmurs. The Amun priesthood is getting too powerful. The temples, especially at Karnak, control vast lands and resources. You pass a tax official who jokes that he works for the temple, not the crown. Everyone laughs, quietly, and then there are the whispers about a new god. You hear it first in passing, a scribe referring to the Aten, a sun disk, a radiant force unlike any other. Not just of Ra, but above Ra. Not a god with a face or animal head, but a pure presence. The king starts using Aten in his official name, Nebmatri. Lord of the truth is Ra, but later you see, Aten is rising. Some say it's Amenhotep's personal god. Others say it's a subtle challenge to Amen's monopoly. You're not sure what to make of it. Just another layer to a king who's already carved his name into half the country. And then he dies. After nearly 4 decades of reign, Amenhotep III vanishes into the afterlife, leaving behind palaces, temples, and an ego larger than any monument. You assume his son, Amenhotep IV, will pick up where he left off. But oh no, you have no idea, because Amenhotep IV is going to break Egypt. He's going to throw out the gods, burn the temples, rename himself, and try to reinvent the entire kingdom from scratch. His name? Akhenaten. And when he's done, you won't recognize Egypt anymore. You're just trying to enjoy a quiet morning in Thebes, buy some bread, avoid eye contact with temple tax collectors, maybe sneak a moment by the river, when the priest at the corner shrine clears his throat and says, in a tone too calm to be good news, there are no gods but the Aten. You freeze, halfway through a bite of barley cake. The what now? Welcome to the reign of Amenhotep IV, soon to be known as Akhenaten. And friend, buckle your sandals, because Egypt is about to get deeply, profoundly weird. At first, no one really notices. Amenhotep IV takes the throne as expected. He starts like any other pharaoh, performs the rituals, honours the gods, sprinkles gold at Karnak, and issues a few reliefs showing him smiting enemies and walking with Amun business as usual. But then he gets ideas. You see it first in his art. A new statue of the king goes up outside the temple, and it looks wrong. He's elongated. Thin arms, wide hips, oddly full lips. Not the square-jawed god king you're used to. Someone calls it feminine. Another says alien. A sculptor nearby just shrugs and says, that's what he asked for. Then his building projects change. You're drafted to one of the new construction teams, but you're not going to Karnak this time. You're going to a weird new sun temple, an Aten temple. No roof, no dark inner sanctum, just open courtyards for the sun to shine directly on the altars. There are no statues of gods, no animal-headed deities, just a round disc with rays extending out like fingers, each one ending in a tiny hand offering Ankh symbols. You ask a fellow worker, where's Amun? He just looks around nervously and whispers, don't say that name. Because Amenhotep IV isn't just favouring the Aten, he's erasing everyone else. A few years in, he goes full throttle. He changes his name to Akhenaten, effective for the Aten. He declares the Aten the only god, not the chief god, not the head of a pantheon, the only one. No Osiris, no Isis, no Thoth, no crocodile gods, no jackal-headed judges, no feather-weighing underworld ceremonies, just one sun, one light, one presence. You stare up at the Aten symbol carved into the temple walls and feel kind of weird. It's beautiful in a sterile way, clean, abstract, and somehow a little cold. Then Akhenaten does the unthinkable. He moves the capital, just packs it all up, palace, court, scribes, artists, and hauls the entire royal presence out of Thebes. You overhear an official shouting the proclamation, a new city will be built, dedicated entirely to the Aten, its name, Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten. You join the first crews sent to this dusty nowhere valley between desert cliffs and the Nile. It's empty, unclaimed, no temples, no traditions, no history. That's the point. Akhenaten wants a clean slate. You build from the ground up, temples, palaces, villas, wide boulevards, all aligned to the path of the sun. And here's the part that really messes with your head. It's kind of incredible. The city works. The light is gorgeous. The architecture is elegant. The air is thick with music and movement. You've never seen the capital this lively, this energized. And at the center of it all, Akhenaten. He's not like the old kings. He doesn't show up on chariots with lions at his heels. He walks among the people, barefoot, sometimes shirtless, with his famously strange features and his serene, unblinking gaze. You see him blessing offerings under the sunlight, arms lifted, lips moving in prayer to the Aten. His wife, Nefertiti, is always by his side, tall, poised, radiant in linen and jewelled headdresses. They're inseparable. You start seeing them in place of the gods, literally. Temple reliefs show Akhenaten and Nefertiti receiving life directly from the Aten's rays. No priests, no intermediaries. The divine hierarchy has been flattened. Now, the sun blesses the king, and the king blesses the world. And the world, it's conflicted. In Akhenaten, things are bright, peaceful, almost utopian. There's art everywhere, scenes of the royal family kissing, eating, playing with their children. Nothing like the stiff, distant reliefs of earlier dynasties. This is raw, personal. You help a painter sketch Akhenaten cradling a baby under the sun's beams and think, this is a king. But back in Thebes, it's a mess. The temples are gutted. Statues of Amun are smashed. Names of other gods are chiselled off walls. You visit a shrine where someone tried to scratch out every mention of Ptah, but missed one in the corner. The priest who once worked there now sells onions in the market. He sees you looking and says, there's only one God now, haven't you heard? And you have. Over and over. The scribes repeat it. The officials repeat it. The city walls repeat it. But it doesn't feel true, not in your bones. Then things get stranger. There's a plague, or something like it. People begin dying in waves. First labourers, then priests, then entire households vanish. Some say it's divine punishment for erasing the gods. Others blame it on foreign disease. You carry bodies to mass graves under Aten's blazing eye and start wondering, if this god is so powerful, where's the protection? Meanwhile, Akhenaten grows more isolated. He stops appearing in public, delegates less. You hear rumours that his daughters have died, that he's obsessed with the Aten, spending his days writing hymns and praising the light, blind to everything else. You sneak into a temple once late at night and find the walls scrawled with the great hymn to the Aten, a long poetic ode comparing the sun to the breath of life, the rhythm of the world. It's beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, it gives you chills. But you still miss the old gods. You're not alone. And then one day it's over. Akhenaten dies. No great funeral, no golden procession, just quiet confusion. His city begins to empty. His temples are abandoned. His successors, one briefly named Smenkari, then another named Neferneferuaten, possibly Nefertiti herself ruling as king, try to keep the Aten flame alive, but the world isn't having it. The court returns to Thebes. The temples of Amun reopen. Sculptors unbury their old moulds. Priests start gluing beards back on statues. You chisel the name Amun back onto a wall you previously helped erase. It's like it never happened. Almost. Because then a boy takes the throne. A boy with a name meant to restore order, Tutankhamun, child of the gods, symbol of restoration, living proof that the heresy is over. But for now you sit beneath the broken pillars of Akhenaten. The city's empty. Sunlight still spills across the courtyards, painting everything gold. You run your hand across a carved relief of Akhenaten and Nefertiti and wonder, was he a madman, a prophet, a fool, or just a man who stared at the sun too long and thought he could become it? You hear the name before you see the face. Tutankhamun. It drifts on the wind like a blessing and a sigh of relief all at once. After the chaos of Akhenaten, after the sun-only doctrine and the half-abandoned capital at Akhenaten, Egypt wants normal. It craves familiar gods, proper rituals and kings who don't look like they're melting in their own statues. And now, they've got a boy in a golden crown. When Tutankhamun comes to the throne, he's maybe 9 or 10, which, let's be honest, is young even for someone not in charge of the cosmos. But no one seems too worried. That's what advisors are for. The real power behind the lotus-shaped throne belongs to 2 men. A, the experienced vizier, and Horemheb, a military commander with ambition carved into his jawline. These 2 steer the kingdom while the boy king plays the part, attending ceremonies, signing off on decrees, and politely not questioning who's really making the decisions. But don't underestimate Tutankhamun. You get a posting at Karnak Temple, helping with repairs to statues that were defaced during Akhenaton's religious revolution. Your supervisor reads a royal edict aloud one morning. Tutankhamun has officially changed his name from Tutankhaten, living image of the Aten, to Tutankhamun, living image of a moon. Boom, the gods are back. Amun, Mut, Khonsu, entire pantheons swept aside during the Aten years, now re-emerge from the sand like a forgotten army. You walk past priests chanting old hymns with new vigour, their temples quickly fattening with donations and political favour. Thebes is thrilled. The temples are alive again, and so is the economy that depends on them. The boy king, meanwhile, plays his role well. He marries Ankhesenamun, his half-sister and a daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, which in royal Egyptian terms is basically a standard HR move. Their marriage is meant to unify dynasties and calm a kingdom still rattled by the heretic years. There's no great conquest during his reign, no pyramids scraping the heavens. But there's a lot of healing, a lot of let's pretend that whole Aten thing didn't happen. You're handed a chisel one day and instructed to remove Akhenaten's name from a wall. Just scrub it out. Replace it with something safer. Thutmose, maybe Amenhotep. Anything that says, everything is fine, we are normal again. But you're not fooled, something's off. Tutankhamun looks healthy in the paintings. Strong, youthful, wrapped in gold with a crook and flail crossed over his chest. But you hear whispers that he walks with a cane, that he's sick, that he was born with too much royal blood and not enough good bones. Then just as quickly as he appeared, he's gone, dead at 18 or 19. Cause? Still debated. Some say malaria, some say a broken leg that got infected, some say genetic disease from all that cosy family tree stuff. Scholars today still argue about it, CT scanning his mummy like it holds national secrets. But back then, his death hits hard. There's no obvious heir, no royal son waiting in the wings. Egypt panics. For the second time in a generation, the royal line has cracked. Ankhesenamun, the queen widow, tries something desperate. You hear the story from a trader bringing lapis from Syria. She writes to the king of the Hittites, Egypt's longtime rivals, and begs for a prince to marry her. She promises power, alliance, peace. And for a second, it works. The Hittites send a prince. He never makes it. Killed, ambushed, vanished. No one's saying who did it, but everyone's side-eyeing Ai and Horemheb. And guess who becomes king next? Ai. Old, cunning, familiar. Probably the same age as some of the statues you're restoring. He marries Ankhesenamun, likely against her will, to secure his throne. You see him pass through Thebes in a chariot, flanked by priests and weary soldiers, and you don't cheer. No one does. Ai rules briefly, tries to keep the lights on. But Egypt's too big now, too volatile, and Ai is too temporary. When he dies, the throne goes to Horemheb, the general who's been lurking in the wings since Tutankhamun could barely hold a scepter. And Horemheb, he's not playing cleanup, he's playing reset. You're posted in Memphis when the royal decree hits. All traces of the Aten heresy will be removed. Akhenaten, scrubbed. Smenkhkare, gone Neferneferuaten. Who? Tutankhamun, downgraded to a footnote. Horemheb launches a massive campaign to erase the entire Amarna period from the official record. You help recarve king lists. It's weird. Chiseling out names you remember from just a few years ago. It's like someone's hitting the backspace key on your life. But at the same time, Horemheb rebuilds. He restores the temples, repairs laws, reorganizes the military and strengthens Egypt's borders. He even creates a new system for recruiting and training scribes and officials, pulling talent from all across the land. He doesn't name an heir from his own line. He has no surviving children. Instead, he chooses a fellow general to take the throne next. And that man? His name is Paramesu, but you'll know him soon as Rameses I, because Egypt's not shrinking anymore. She's about to put on her war paint again. And the next dynasty? It's going to be loud, flashy, and immortal. But before that, something else happens. Something unexpected. You're sitting outside a tomb one evening watching the stars blink awake over the Valley of the Kings, when a merchant stumbles into the village. "I found it," he whispers. "I found his tomb. It's 1323 BCE, and you don't know it yet, but what's just been discovered will someday be called the most famous tomb in human history. A resting place untouched, full of gold, chariots, games, sandals, weapons, and one flawless mask that will shine across millennia. The boy who brought Egypt back from the edge, Tutankhamun. Maybe he didn't rule long. Maybe he was manipulated, erased, forgotten. But someday, the world will remember him, and his name will live forever." You wake up to the rhythmic thud of drums echoing through the streets of Pi-Ramesses. Yes, the new capital has a name now, and it's not subtle. The new dynasty is here. It's the 19th dynasty. And if you're wondering who's behind the noise, the answer is a man who loves statues, temples, chariots, and, most of all, himself. His name is Ramesses II. But before we get to the main event, a quick rewind. After Horemheb dies and passes the throne to Paramessu, Egypt begins its climb into one of its most iconic eras. Paramessu takes the throne as Ramesses I, but his reign is brief, a little under 2 years. Think of him as the starter engine for a dynasty that's about to go full turbo. His son, Seti I, picks up the reins and runs with them. You're pulled into a workforce assigned to his mortuary temple at Abydos, a place that, quite frankly, makes the Old Kingdom tombs look like mud huts. Seti's temple is refined, richly decorated and filled with scenes that not only glorify the king, but also pay respectful tribute to the entire Egyptian pantheon. And right there, carved into a hallway, you notice something strange. A king list. A chronological who's who of Egypt's greatest rulers. But wait, Akhenaten's not on it. Neither is Tutankhamun. The Amarna period, completely deleted. Again. Horemheb started the erasure, but Seti perfects it. It's like the weird monotheism era never happened. You raise your eyebrows. But also, you kind of get it. Seti isn't just building a temple, he's building legitimacy, a link to Egypt's golden past to remind people, we're back and the gods are happy again. And then comes Ramesses II. The name echoes everywhere. At first he's just Seti's teenage son, a prince tagging along on military campaigns. But by the time he takes the throne, the guy is ready. And when you say his name aloud, it's not Ra-Meses. It's more like thunder clearing its throat. Ramesses the Great, that's what they'll call him. And by the end of his reign, which will stretch over 6 decades, you'll see why. You get your first taste of his ambition in stone. He builds like no one before him. Temples, statues, cities, obelisks. You name it. He slaps his name on it. Some of it is genuinely new. A lot of it. He just carves over the names of past kings and pretends he did it all. You joke that if he could, he'd rename the Nile Ramesses River. His favourite monument? Abu Simbel. You work on that project, carving into the southern cliffs above the Nile just north of Nubia. 4 colossal statues of the king sit outside the entrance, each over 60 feet tall. You stare up at them every morning and think, this man wants to be remembered by the gods. Inside, the temple is aligned so that twice a year, the rising sun pierces the sanctuary and lights up the seated statues of the gods, and Ramesses himself seated among them, not behind them, with them. Subtle, he is not. But Ramesses isn't all about temples. He's also a warrior king. His biggest challenge comes from the Hittites, a rival superpower in the north. Their empire spreads across modern-day Turkey and Syria, and they've been playing tug-of-war with Egypt over control of Canaan and the trade-rich city of Kadesh. So in year 5 of his reign, Ramesses marches north. You're too old for the front lines now, but you travel with the logistics crews, behind the chariots and horses stacking grain, fixing axles, and you hear the build-up everywhere. The Great Campaign. The battle to end battles. The Battle of Kadesh is legendary. Ramesses divides his army into 4 divisions and rushes ahead of his support troops, confident and possibly a little overhyped. When he reaches Kadesh, he's ambushed, completely surrounded by Hittite forces. For a moment it looks like it's all over. Then, according to him, he personally mounts his chariot, rallies the troops, and charges into the enemy like a whirlwind wrapped in bronze and lightning. You read his account later, inscribed a dozen times across temple walls. It goes something like, "I was alone, surrounded. My horse fell. I got up. I smote them all. The Hittites trembled. I was the god of war incarnate. Also, did I mention I was alone? Total objectivity? Not exactly. In reality, the battle ends in a stalemate. But Rameses spins it into one of the greatest military propaganda campaigns in history. You can't walk into a temple without seeing the relief. Rameses standing tall in his chariot, reins tied around his waist, bow in hand, enemies grovelling at his feet. Years later, Egypt and the Hittites agree to the world's first recorded peace treaty. You help deliver a copy to a temple in Thebes, where it's carved into a wall, two powers, pledging mutual respect, alliance, and eternal friendship. Diplomatic bromance, Bronze Age edition. Back home, Rameses celebrates with more building. He adds to Karnak, to Luxor, builds Ramesseum, his mortuary temple across the Nile, and begins constructing a city, Pi-Rameses, in the delta. It's grand, massive, full of warehouses, military barracks, and imported luxuries. It screams empire. And Egypt? Egypt is thriving. Trade flows. The Nile floods generously. Foreign dignitaries visit with gifts. Rameses marries foreign princesses, one from the Hittites, in a symbolic union of old enemies turned in-laws. He also fathers a lot of children. You lose track after 50, but some records suggest he fathered over 100 sons and daughters. Whole neighbourhoods are probably related to him. You joke that a DNA test in the royal court would just come back Rameses. But beneath all this glory, Egypt is aging, slowly, quietly. By the time Rameses hits year 60 of his reign, his skin sags, his teeth ache, and his kingdom, though still rich, is straining under the weight of all this eternity, officials whisper. Grain stores shrink. The priests of Amun are growing in power again. Still, no one dares challenge the old lion. You see his final statue go up. A seated colossus, so massive it cracks under its own weight. You watch the workers scramble to patch it, and it feels like a metaphor. Big, majestic, but starting to wobble. Rameses dies around age 90. 90. You've watched entire dynasties rise and fall in less time. He's buried in the Valley of the Kings, in a tomb as winding and golden as his legacy. But his name is everywhere. On statues, on temples, on walls and obelisks and bricks. For centuries, people will find his monuments and think he built Egypt. And in a way, he did. But now he's gone. And the weight of empire, it's about to get heavier. You're standing in the shadow of a monument so tall it blots out the morning sun. And yes, of course, it says Rameses all over it. You could be in Thebes, Memphis, Pi-Rameses, or some half-forgotten village along the Nile, doesn't matter. If it's made of stone and older than a lunch break, odds are Rameses carved his name into it. But now, he's gone, and Egypt doesn't quite know what to do with itself. It's 1213 BCE. Rameses II, the most durable ego the world's ever known, is finally dead. After a reign that lasted 66 years, the throne passes to his 13th son, 13th, Meneptah, who's already in his 60s when he inherits the job. That's like getting handed the keys to a Ferrari right after knee surgery. You hear the announcement in Thebes. Priests chanting, scribes scribbling, messengers trying to pronounce the full royal titulary without choking on the incense smoke. Everyone's doing their best to act confident. But the truth is, there's a storm coming. You see the signs immediately. The sea peoples have arrived. No one really knows who they are. They come from the north and the west, maybe the Aegean, maybe somewhere further out, like ghost towns that decided to grow legs and march toward Egypt with boats full of angry warriors. They don't trade, they don't negotiate, they just land, burn and move on. You're posted in the delta, helping dig emergency trenches outside a fortress when word reaches you. They've hit Syria, then Cyprus, then Ugarit. Then the entire eastern Mediterranean starts collapsing like a card house in a sandstorm. This isn't just invasion, it's the end of the Bronze Age. But Egypt isn't down yet. In year 5 of his reign, Meneptah musters the army and defeats the Sea Peoples and their Libyan allies in a major battle. He writes a huge inscription bragging about it, of course. It's Egypt, after all. but the victory feels fragile. You can smell the exhaustion on the kingdom. The Nile's still flowing, but it's starting to feel like she's carrying too much weight. Oh, and tucked into that same inscription, a little detail that will get historians very excited one day. Merneptah writes that he also defeated a group in Canaan called Israel. It's the first known mention of Israel in recorded history. You don't think much of it at the time. It's just one more rebellious tribe in the hills. But scholars in the future, they'll argue about it for centuries. Welcome to another one of Egypt's greatest hits, being accidentally involved in every origin story ever. Back in the royal court, things don't improve. Merneptah dies after a short reign, and suddenly there are more claimants to the throne than you have sandals. One of them, Amenmesse, might be a usurper or a legitimate heir, or a cousin who just got tired of waiting. Either way, he seizes power while another pharaoh, Seti II, is still alive and ruling somewhere else. Egypt splits. Again, you're working in a small village near the Valley of the Kings when you hear two conflicting royal decrees in the same week. One starts with, "Long live Seti II," the other, "Praise to Amenmesse." You keep both just in case. This back and forth doesn't last long. Seti II eventually wins, Amenmesse vanishes, possibly assassinated, and things settle down. Sort of. But the damage is done. The dynasty is stumbling. Seti II dies and leaves behind a son, but the kid, Siptah, is maybe 14, maybe younger. And oh, right, he might have polio. You see him once being carried into a ceremony, his leg twisted, his eyes wide and unready. He's a puppet. Behind the throne, a name you know by now, Queen Tusret. And she's one of Ramesses II's daughters and one of the few women in Egyptian history to fully rule as pharaoh in her own right. For a while she holds it together, but by now Egypt's politics feel like the tail end of a drunken festival. Half the people are passed out, the other half are fighting over who gets to take the leftovers home, and that's when everything collapses. A man named Setnacht seizes power. From where? Unclear. Maybe he's a military man, maybe just a bold opportunist. Either way, he storms the palace, ends Tusret's reign, and declares the beginning of a new dynasty, the 20th. You see the name carved over old inscriptions, fresh and crude, like someone grabbing a spray can and tagging over a mural. Setnacht doesn't rule long, but he lays the foundation for his son. And his son is Ramesses III. You hear the name and think, here we go again. But Ramesses III isn't trying to be another monument-obsessed god-king. He's trying to survive, and he takes the throne in 1186 BCE, and Egypt is under siege. Again. The Sea Peoples are back, more organised, more desperate, more devastating. They're swarming the eastern delta, pushing into Palestine, burning cities, toppling empires like it's their full-time job. The Hittites, Gon Mycenae, collapsed, Ugarit, vaporised. Babylon's holding on by a thread. Egypt holds the line. Ramesses III mobilises the navy. You help reinforce ships at a dock in the Nile Delta, watching as archers prepare to launch volleys at oncoming warships. It's like something out of a fever dream. Chariots on boats, spears in every direction, drums pounding like the gods themselves are holding their breath. And somehow, Egypt wins. The Sea Peoples are repelled. The victory is recorded on the walls of Medinet Habu, Ramesses III's mortuary temple in Thebes. You visit it after the battle, running your fingers across the reliefs, chaotic scenes of warriors, prisoners, ships crashing, and the king standing above it all like the world's angriest lighthouse. But even in victory, something's different. The cities are still standing, the temples still glow at sunset, but the world order is gone. The trade networks, broken. The copper from Cyprus, interrupted the cedars from Lebanon, delayed, or gone entirely. You walk through markets and see empty stalls where merchants used to shout. Egypt has survived, yes, but alone, and worse is coming. In the years that follow, grain prices soar, workers strike for the first time in history. You're living in Deir el-Medina when it happens. The tomb workers don't get their rations, so they lay down their tools and sit outside the Valley of the Kings, refusing to work until they're fed. A scribe writes it down like it's a revelation. They have made a sitting in protest. The empire is stretched thin, the treasury is bleeding, and Ramesses III, well, someone wants him dead. You hear the whispers, the harem conspiracy. One of his wives, Tie, plots to have her son, Pentaweret, take the throne. Palace officials get involved. Poison is prepared. Guards are bribed. It's a full-on royal coup attempt, and it almost works. Rameses III is mortally wounded. Throat cut, most likely. His mummy, discovered centuries later, shows the wound clear as a death sentence, but he clings to life just long enough to punish the conspirators. You read the trial transcripts in temple archives. The plotters are executed, others forced to commit suicide. Pentaweret is found hanged, whether by his own hand or not, no one says. It's dark, messy, undeniably human. Rameses III dies shortly after. His tomb is massive, beautifully painted, but it's buried under the shadow of an Egypt that survived the apocalypse, but won't escape its aftermath. You look around and realise this isn't the empire of Thutmose or Rameses the Great anymore. It's something thinner, hungrier, flickering. The world has changed, and Egypt? Egypt is trying not to vanish with it. You're sitting on the steps of a temple in Thebes, sipping from a dented jug of sour beer, and trying not to think too hard about how the city smells more like donkey than divinity lately, when someone next to you mutters, "Egypt's still here. Somehow." And it's true. Despite the gods being disrespected, the tombs being robbed, the grain being scarce, and the treasury being emptier than a scribe's flask at quitting time, Egypt hasn't fallen. Not yet. But it's not doing great either. The 20th dynasty drags on after Rameses III, but it's like watching a parade that's lost the music and started tripping over its own banners. The next pharaohs keep the name Rameses, as if saying it enough times will bring back the glory days, but you can feel it. The name's wearing thin. Rameses IV starts with some promise. He wants to build, restore order, get the workers back on his side. You help cart limestone to one of his construction sites in Thebes, and for a minute, it feels like the old rhythm is returning. Priests pray, chisels clang, people murmur about better days ahead. But the budget's not there. Neither is the political stability. Rameses IV dies after only about 6 years, and his successors, Rameses V and VI, are dealing with economic crises so bad, even the grain scribes can't keep track. You see it in the markets, copper tools traded for bread, temple lands getting sold off in chunks, sacred cows literally eaten because no one can afford to just worship them anymore. And then there's the tomb robbing. You work briefly as a watchman near the Valley of the Kings, and let's just say, you're not the only one on night shift. Word spreads that even the tomb of Ramesses VI was hit. Gold ripped from coffins, statues smashed, sacred texts tossed aside like old scrolls. A priest tells you that the body of a king was moved, reburied elsewhere in secret to protect it. That's the new normal. Divine kings, stolen and stashed like someone's trying to pawn eternity. By the time Rameses IX takes the throne, the scribes in Thebes are so fed up with the corruption and disorder that they start writing it down in detail. You read one such papyrus in a storage room during a repair job. It's a report. A full-on bureaucratic disaster log about tomb robbery investigations. Names, confessions, temple guards turning informants. It's the first police procedural in history, and it's grim. Not just because of the theft, but because no one seems surprised anymore. The idea of eternal rest. It's a luxury the gods themselves can barely afford. Meanwhile, the priesthood of Amun is thriving. Oh yeah. While the kings are scraping together silver bracelets to pay their soldiers, the high priests of Amun at Karnak are practically running a shadow government. You pass their granaries on the way to market and they look full, overflowing. You see priests with better sandals than the pharaoh's advisors. By Rameses XI, it's clear. Egypt has split in two. The north is nominally under the control of the king in Pi-Rameses, but Thebes, down south, is run by the high priest of Amun. A man named Herihor starts issuing decrees, minting his own coins, even putting his name on monuments. And get this, he's still calling himself a priest. You visit a temple one afternoon to deliver pigment and see Herihor in full regalia, scepter in one hand, the god's blessings chanted in his ear, flanked by guards. He looks more like a pharaoh than the actual pharaoh. That's the final twist of this dynasty. Not an invasion, not an earthquake, just replacement from within. Egypt has become a split-screen country. 2 authorities, 2 power centres, and no one's quite sure who's in charge. You can feel the weariness in the streets. The grandeur's still there, technically. Temples still stand. Names are still chiselled, but the heartbeat is slow. The Nile rises and falls like always, but fewer people sing hymns to Happy Now. Fewer statues are built. More people pray quietly for smaller things. Food, health, protection from thieves, enough linen to bury your father properly. You're in your late 50s now, maybe early 60s. You've served under more kings than you have fingers. Some good, some mad, some just names scratched out by the next one. You used to believe pharaohs lived forever. Now you know the afterlife is complicated. One night you visit the edge of the Valley of the Kings just to look. It's quiet. Too quiet. No guards, no chants. Just sand and shadow and the scent of past glory lingering like incense on an empty altar. You think of Ramesses the Great, how his tomb, once a symbol of divine power, had to be reburied by nervous priests. You think of Akhenaten, erased and resurrected by historians long after his time. You think of Tutankhamun, the boy king whose dusty name would someday roar louder than any. And you wonder, is this the end? Is Egypt finally done? But the river keeps flowing. The stars still rise over the cliffs. And somewhere, a scribe is still dipping his reed into ink, still writing the names of gods who haven't heard prayers in generations. Maybe that's what's left now. Not glory, not empire, just memory, carved into stone, whispered into papyrus, passed from one worker to the next. One dynasty ends, and another waits in the wings. And you keep chiselling, because someone has to remember. The sun creeps over Thebes with the same golden laziness it always has, lighting up dust, temple walls, and statues of gods long since out of favour. But the city feels different now. Not broken, just quiet. Like it's forgotten whether it's still supposed to be an empire. You're older now, bones clicking like worn gears, and Egypt is older too, past its prime, but still standing. A little crooked, a little faded, but alive. The new kingdom is gone. And what comes next? It's not a conquest. Not yet. It's something more delicate. Disintegration. We've officially entered the third intermediate period. And yeah, it sounds like a lecture you sleep through in school, but in real time, it feels like your homeland is slowly forgetting how to be one thing. After Ramesses XI, the 21st dynasty technically begins under a man named Smendes. Not a warrior, not a god king, just a practical guy ruling from Tanis up in the delta. If you're wondering where Thebes fits into this, it doesn't really. In Thebes, the high priests of Amun still call the shots. They don't even pretend anymore. Their sons inherit their offices like kings, and they start wearing royal titles, building tombs fit for pharaohs, and minting coins with their faces. You visit Karnak one morning to deliver copper nails for a storage renovation. The priest who greets you is flanked by bodyguards draped in gold and being announced by 3 heralds like he's rare incarnate. He nods at you like you're a bug. This isn't religion anymore, it's a kingdom in a cassock. But wait, up north in Tanis, there's another king. Smendes and his successors claim the double crown, issue decrees, even build tombs. You travel there briefly, hitching a ride on a papyrus barge that smells like wet bread. And when you arrive, the royal court feels legit. But everyone knows they don't control all of Egypt, maybe half, on a good day. You're living in a time of parallel rule, north and south, king and priest. Sometimes they're friendly, sometimes it's passive-aggressive civil war. Either way, Egypt is now more of a brand than a centralised power, and that's when things get weirder. You hear the name Shoshonkh for the first time while cleaning a statue base outside Karnak. It doesn't sound Egyptian. That's because it isn't. Not entirely he's Libyan, or more accurately Libyan descended. His family had settled in Egypt generations ago, and now they're part of the army, the bureaucracy, even the priesthood. The 22nd dynasty begins when Shoshonkh I seizes power around 945 BCE. And honestly, the guy is competent. He's a general, a strategist, and he brings a bit of that old Ramesses energy back, marches into Thebes, reasserts control over the south, and gets himself crowned properly. You watch his reliefs go up at Karnak. He's shown smiting enemies, marching through foreign lands, claiming divine favour, and then He invades Canaan. Yeah, that Canaan. You hear that he even raids Jerusalem, and centuries later, scribes from distant lands will write about it in books that become part of a very famous religious collection. But to you, it's just another campaign, another distant place with a lot of copper and very little water. Back in Egypt, Sheshonk's reign is solid, but he can't hold it all together. After his death, the fragmentation returns. His successors, Osorkon, Takalot and others, try to rule from Tanis, but Thebes slips again. The priests push back. Egypt fractures again. At one point there are 4 rulers claiming the throne at the same time. It's like a pharaoh impersonator contest with actual armies. You walk through a city during one of these moments and see shrines half decorated, temples bearing multiple royal cartouches side by side, like even the stone is shrugging. And meanwhile, Kush is rising. Down in Nubia, south of Elephantine, a new kingdom is emerging. Not just a bunch of tribute-paying territories anymore. They have kings now, temples, gold mines, ambition. You see the signs. Nubian-style art shows up in Thebes, more dark stone, more archery motifs. You meet a merchant who boasts about the new royal line in Napata, where Egyptian gods are worshipped in their original forms, almost more traditionally than in Egypt itself. Egypt had ruled Nubia for centuries. Now Nubia is watching Egypt fail, and waiting. You return to Thebes one spring to find the tomb workers on half pay. Karnak is operating at maybe 50%. Some halls shuttered, festivals cut back. The river gods aren't getting their usual offerings. People start mumbling about bad floods, bad omens, bad rulers. The land that once carved pyramids from solid desert is now held together by custom, not conviction. And the Nile? She just keeps flowing. You get older, greyer, slower. You help repair a collapsed colonnade at Medinet Habu, and remember when it was pristine, when Rameses III walked here with banners and drums. Now, the reliefs are fading. The tourists are gone. The echo of power is louder than the power itself. But you keep working, because even in a time of decline, people still need walls built, gods honoured, names carved, even if those names don't last, even if someone else will chisel them off in 50 years. One day, walking home from the job site, you hear it. They say the Nubians are coming, not as mercenaries, not as tribute, as rulers. A new power, a familiar power, but this time coming from the south. And Egypt? She's too tired to stop it. You've seen a lot of dynasties in your time, but this feels different. Word spreads fast in Thebes. The Nubians are here. But no one's panicking. No burning, no looting, no panicked priests stuffing scrolls into donkeys. The city doesn't fall. It just kind of exhales, like it's been holding its breath for a century. It starts with a name, Piye. You first hear it whispered in the temple kitchens where old women gossip between chopping onions and preparing incense cakes. He's not like the others, one says. He prays before he fights. You squint at the temple wall. Sure enough, someone's painted over a cartouche with a new one. Pi, King of Kush, Lord of the Two Lands. Wait, Two Lands? You're back in Pharaoh territory now. But here's the twist. He's not ruling from Thebes or Memphis or Tanis. He's ruling from Napata, a Nubian capital deep in the south. His family, the 25th dynasty, is entirely Kushite. And their claim? Not conquest, not rebellion, restoration. Pi says he's come not to destroy Egypt but to save it. And after generations of chaos, split kingdoms and priests playing kingmaker, most people aren't arguing. You meet one of his envoys outside Karnak. The man's tall, dark-skinned, cloaked in leopard fur, and speaking flawless Middle Egyptian. He places offerings at the altar of Amun like it's 1400 BCE again. There's something weirdly comforting about it. The Nubians may be foreign, but they remember the gods better than the Egyptians do. Piye's campaign northward isn't bloody, it's surgical. He defeats a handful of Delta rulers. Some surrender without a fight. His victory Stela, which you help copy for temple archives, tells the story in dramatic detail. How he prayed to Amun, fasted, washed himself in holy water, then crushed his enemies. In that order. He doesn't even stay in Egypt long. After winning, he returns to Napata. Mic drop. But the dynasty is only beginning. After Piye dies, his successors, Shebeka, Tahaka, and Tanutameni, Take Egypt's throne fully. You're there to watch their rule up close. And you know what? It feels like a revival. Suddenly Thebes is alive again. Temples are repaired. Festivals resume. Priests walk the streets with their heads held high. Amun's name is back in full force. No erasures this time. You carve reliefs at Karnak showing King Shabaka, embracing gods in the old poses, and honestly it's like carving for the ancestors. There's even a push for literature. Shabaka claims to have found an ancient religious text, the Memphite theology, and orders it recopied before it disappears forever. You help ink it onto a black basalt slab. It feels important. Like Egypt's memory is being patched together before it fades completely. Then comes Taharqa. Tall, powerful, deeply religious. He's the kind of king Egypt hasn't seen since the days of Thutmose. And he doesn't just rule Egypt. His kingdom stretches deep into Nubia, and he controls parts of Canaan as well. You help build a shrine where he's called Son of Re, guardian of the Black Land and the Red. People believe in him. For a moment it's like the glory days are back, but up north, something else is stirring. You hear it first from a Phoenician sailor, half drunk and smelling like fish. The Assyrians are coming. You've heard of them. They're the bulldogs of Mesopotamia, spiked helmets, bronze weapons, zero chill. These are not people you want to be neighbours with. By the time you reach Memphis, the rumours are confirmed. The Assyrians, under Esarhaddon, have launched their armies westward. They're swallowing city-states like dates and eyeing Egypt next. And sure enough, they come. The first time, Egypt holds. Taharqa's armies meet the Assyrians head-on. There are battles, losses, victories. You carve scenes of Egyptian Nubian soldiers clashing with bearded Assyrian troops, their strange chariots grinding across the soil like angry gods. But the second time, it's worse. Ashurbanipal, Esarhaddon's son, doesn't just invade. He crushes. Cities burn. Memphis is sacked. You see terrified families streaming into Thebes with horror in their eyes. They flayed priests alive, someone whispers. They impaled nobles outside the gates. Taharqa retreats south, holding on to Nubia. Egypt falls into chaos. You think it's over. But wait, there's one more roll of the dice. Tanutamani, Taharqa's nephew, tries to take Egypt back. He sweeps into Thebes like a flame, retakes Memphis, inspires hope, shouts Amun's name from temple roofs. And then, the Assyrians return. This time they don't just defeat him, they burn Thebes. Let that sink in. Thebes, the city of Amun, the jewel of Upper Egypt, a place that survived Hyksos, famines, Aten cults, and decades of decline. Sacked. Temples looted, statues smashed, priests dragged into the streets. You help bury relics in the sand, hoping someone someday will find them and remember. And then the Nubians retreat, for good. Back to Napata. The 25th dynasty is over, not disgraced, not forgotten, just outmaneuvered by history. And into the vacuum steps a new family. Not foreign, not royal, just smart. A governor of Sais in the Delta, a former Assyrian vassal who sees an opening. His name, Psamtik I. And whether Egypt likes it or not, he's about to start the last true Egyptian dynasty. You sit by the river one evening, sandals off, toes in the Nile, and think, how many times can a kingdom die and still keep breathing? You hear his name long before you see his face, Psamtik. It drifts down the Nile on merchant boats. It's etched into temple bricks being repurposed from half-toppled walls. It's murmured by priests who are cautiously optimistic, and by scribes who are, frankly, just relieved to have one name to write again without crossing it out a week later. Psamtik I, governor of Sais, a city in the western delta, starts as little more than an Assyrian puppet. But what he does next? It's almost alchemical. He takes a broken Egypt, splintered, bruised, partly on fire, and reassembles it piece by piece. You're back in Memphis now, mending roof tiles on a merchant's villa, when a government official posts a new edict on the city wall. The Assyrians are gone. Egypt stands alone. You raise an eyebrow. Is that true? Well, not entirely. But Psamtik's smart. He's not just a restorer, he's a manipulator of momentum. The Assyrians are distracted by revolts elsewhere, so he seizes the moment, reclaims Upper Egypt, and boots out what's left of their garrisons. He even marches into Thebes, once burned by Assyrians, and re-establishes Egyptian control. The high priests of Amun don't resist. They're tired. Everyone's tired. But this Psamtik guy, he's not tired. He recruits Greek mercenaries, which is new. These foreign warriors, wearing armour that clinks in strange places, land in the delta with curved swords and loud drinking habits. You serve in a work camp nearby, where they practice manoeuvres by yelling in rhythms and drinking wine from giant shells. You're sceptical at first, but you watch them train, fight, win. They hold the borders. They protect shipping lanes. Egypt hasn't had functional border security since Ramesses III, and now the roads are almost safe again. Almost. The new energy isn't just military. Psamtik starts a renaissance. He revives temple building, funds art, orders historical texts recopied. You're sent to repaint hieroglyphs at a crumbling chapel near Abydos. It's small, a side project, but there's something comforting in the brushstrokes. It feels like the kingdom is remembering itself. You hear priests talking about him as if he's the second coming of Thutmose. He isn't, but he's something else, stable. And that's been in short supply. He rules for over 50 years. By the end of his reign, Egypt is once again unified, from the delta to the southern border. The Nubians have been pushed back. The Assyrians are gone. The temples are open. The gods are smiling, or at least less frowny. But Psamtik isn't immortal. No one is. After his death, his son takes the throne, Necho II. And Necho wants to think big. You hear wild rumours that he's trying to dig a canal from the Nile to the Red Sea, something no one's managed to pull off. You're not sure what to believe until you get a job at one of the eastern construction sites. And sure enough, there's a trench wider than a temple causeway and deeper than your patience. You haul baskets of sand, sweat buckets, and listen to overseers argue about whether it'll ever reach the sea. Spoiler, it won't. Not yet. But Necho's ambitions don't stop there. He turns his attention north, toward Asia. You're assigned to the port at Pelusium when Necho's army marches east, trying to intervene in the power struggles between the fading Assyrians and the rising Babylonians. It's risky, bold. It's also doomed. At the Battle of Carchemish, Necho's army is crushed by Babylonian forces under a prince named Nebuchadnezzar. Yes, that Nebuchadnezzar, the one who'll later build huge towers, terrorize Jerusalem, and generally develop a flair for world domination. Egypt's dreams of reclaiming empire? Dead on arrival. You return home to find the mood subdued. Necho is still king. Egypt still stands. But now everyone knows. The age of Egyptian global power is over. You're not the centre anymore. You're a regional player, important, but no longer invincible. Then comes Psamtik II, Necho's son. He tries to rally some old-school patriotism, leads a campaign into Nubia, smashes statues of Kushite kings, and brags about it in a series of temple inscriptions that you help repaint. But you can feel it. The real threat isn't south anymore, it's Persia. Oh yes, the Persians are rising. From the east, this enormous organised empire, led by a man named Cyrus the Great, starts hoovering up territory like it's on clearance Babylonia falls, Media, Lydia. You hear about entire cities surrendering before the Persians even arrive. It's not just war, it's inevitable. When Apries, one of the last kings of the 26th dynasty, fails to stop a rebellion, a general named Amasis seizes power. You'd think it would be another chaotic coup, but surprisingly, Amasis turns out to be one of Egypt's best late-game pharaohs. He's not royal by birth, just a clever military man with charisma and a deep love of Greek wine. Yes, the Greeks are still here. In fact, under Amasis they thrive. He grants them a colony at Naucratis, and it becomes a thriving port city. Greek temples, Egyptian customs, and enough shouting to be heard in Memphis. You travel there once, and it's like stepping into a different world. Scrolls and olives and statues that look nothing like Horus or Isis. Egypt is now officially multicultural, and that's good, until it's not. Amasis dies, and his son Psamtik III takes over, and right on schedule, Persia arrives. Under Cambyses II, son of Cyrus, the Persian army crosses the Sinai and marches into the delta. Egypt assembles its forces. You stand in a crowd at Pelusium, watching the battle unfold in the dust and heat. It's not even close. The Persian army is fast, ruthless, and allegedly brings cats into battle, knowing the Egyptians won't shoot at sacred animals. You think that's a stretch, but either way, Egypt loses. Psamtik III is captured, taken to Susa, executed. And just like that, Egypt becomes a Persian province. No fanfare, no resistance, just occupation. You stand on the temple steps in Memphis as Persian governors march by, and you realize it's the first time Egypt has been fully conquered. Not by rebels, not by invaders passing through, but by an empire that plans to stay. The pharaohs, gone. The throne, empty. And for the first time in over 2,000 years, Egypt is no longer its own master. You never thought you'd see it. Egypt ruled by a man who's never even seen the Nile in flood, whose crown isn't carved in gold but signed in cuneiform. It's 525 BCE, and your new pharaoh is a Persian king named Cambyses II. His court's in Susa. His gods are foreign. His language? Not even close. You hear the official declaration in the temple square at Memphis. Some trembling scribe in stiff linen reads it out. Cambyses, king of kings, chosen of Ahura Mazda, now pharaoh of Egypt. You glance at the old priest next to you. He doesn't blink. This is how Egypt ends. Not in fire, not in glory, just paperwork. The people take it with the same shrugging resignation you've seen after countless successions. Because sure, the king is Persian, but the sun still rises, the bakers still bake, the Nile still breathes in and out. And that's the thing about Egypt. It's built to endure. Still, it's different. You walk through a temple district in Thebes and see new guards. Persian immortals, they call themselves. Tall, grim, perfect beards. Their armour doesn't clang. It whispers. They don't touch the sacred relics, but they don't bow to them either. You can feel it. They respect Egypt, but they don't need it. Cambyses does his best, at least at first. He's crowned in Egyptian tradition. He offers to the gods. He lets the priests keep their jobs. He even commissions temple repairs. But the stories about him? Not great. Some say he mocked the gods. Others say he stabbed the sacred Apis bull to death. Some claim he tried to destroy every Egyptian belief system just to prove a point. Modern historians argue whether any of that actually happened. But you? You just know that by the time he dies, possibly by accident, possibly by dagger, Egypt feels used. When Cambyses dies in 522 BCE, chaos erupts back in Persia. Revolts flare. Multiple kings claim the throne. For a heartbeat, you wonder if Egypt might slip free. You even join a small group in Sais who start praying to Psamtik again just in case. But no. The Persians squash the rebellions and tighten their grip. Enter Darius I. And you know what? He's surprisingly competent. Not Egyptian, not trying to be, but Darius respects structure. He keeps Egypt as a satrapy, a province of the Persian Empire, but lets it keep its traditions. You help etch one of his trilingual inscriptions, Old Persian, Elamite, Babylonian and Egyptian. 4 scripts, 1 king. You mutter to your apprentice, "At least this one knows how to delegate." He smiles, barely. Under Darius, Egypt gets infrastructure. New canals, temple renovations, even a renewed effort to finish that Red Sea Nile canal project Necho dreamed about. You work on it briefly, mud up to your knees, hauling stones with a crew that includes Egyptians, Greeks and even a few Medes. It feels almost cosmopolitan, but still not home. You know the Persians don't see Egypt as sacred, not the way Egyptians do. To them, it's a prize, a fertile breadbasket, a beautiful ancient trophy, and even that, they almost lose. In 404 BCE, Egypt breaks away again. A native Egyptian, Imhotep, rises up and declares independence. You're too old to fight, but you cheer anyway. The Persians fall back. Egypt breathes on its own for the first time in over a century. The 28th, 29th and 30th dynasties come and go in a flurry of brief kings and last gasps. You serve under Nectanebo I, one of the final great builders. He pours funds into temples, encourages astrology, and builds massive walls to keep invaders out. But deep down, everyone knows it's borrowed time, because Persia's coming back. In 343 BCE, Artaxerxes III invades, and this time he means business. The cities don't hold, the walls crumble. You flee Thebes before the fires start. When you return, the sacred lake is full of ash, and someone's carved over Amun's name again. It's all happening again. You retire in Memphis, or what's left of it. The city's still technically alive, but the pulse is faint. You sit in your small courtyard one evening, fanning yourself as your grandson recites old stories of Akhenaten, of Thutmose, of the pyramid builders. You stop him mid-sentence and ask, "Do you think they'll remember us?" He shrugs, and then, when you think it's truly over, Alexander arrives. Yes, that Alexander. You're long past fighting age when the Macedonian king, barely in his 20s, marches into Egypt in 332 BCE. The Persians don't even resist this time, they've bled Egypt dry. Alexander? He walks in like he owns the place. But here's the twist. He doesn't conquer Egypt. He embraces it. He offers to the gods, honours Amun, visits the oracle at Siwa, deep in the desert, where the priests allegedly declare him a son of Zeus, or Amun, depending on your translation. You smirk when you hear that. Of course, every conqueror eventually wants Egypt to adopt them, and Egypt does. Again. But Alexander doesn't stay. He has places to go, empires to topple, legacies to chase. He dies young, and Egypt passes into the hands of one of his generals, Ptolemy. And that's the final transformation. Egypt is now a Greek kingdom, not in name. In name it's still Kemet, still the Black Land. But its rulers are Greek-speaking. Their gods wear togas. Their coins bear foreign faces. The Ptolemaic dynasty will rule for 300 more years. It will see new wonders, the Library of Alexandria, the Lighthouse, Cleopatra, Julius Caesar. But all that's another story. You sit on the porch of your mud brick house, the one your great-grandfather helped build during the reign of Seti I. The stars are out. The river hums. You close your eyes and remember the scent of temple incense, the rhythm of chisels on stone, the way sunlight hit Karnak at dawn. And you know, Egypt isn't gone. Not really. It's just sleeping somewhere beneath the sand, waiting. And so, here we are, at the quiet edge of a journey that started with gods carved into cliffs, and ends with scrolls stashed in libraries we don't even have words for yet. You've walked through it all. You've watched pyramids rise from nothing, seen the Nile flood and fall, followed kings who thought they were gods, and gods who behaved like kings. You've helped carve tombs, flee wars, rebuild temples, and mourn every time some bright gilded age slipped into the sand. And still, Egypt carried on. That's the real story, isn't it? Not just the gold and the glory, but the endurance, the stubborn, beautiful resilience. Egypt didn't survive because of war chariots or obelisks or 20-ton statues of men in linen skirts. Egypt survived because generation after generation of people, just like you, kept the fire going. You did the work, you told the stories you remembered, and because of that, 5,000 years later, a teenager in New York or a mom in Nairobi or a night owl in Sao Paulo can hear the name Nefertiti or Tutankhamun and feel a little spark of recognition. You're not alone under the stars anymore. You're part of something vast, sunlit, and echoing through time like a hymn whispered across a river. So as you lay your head down tonight, picture that river. Feel the hush of sand beneath sandals, the warmth of limestone walls at sunset, the distant beat of a drum calling workers to the causeway. And know that somewhere under a blanket of stars and centuries, Egypt is still waiting, still whispering, still shining.